Ever slept this morning? I felt good inside panicked. Yay! Oh,
I know, right? You're like, oh, that felt so good.
oh no! Oh crap! I have two other people getting ready.
Good. All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November 21st Litchfield Budget Committee meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we'll start tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. A little bit different of a setup tonight over at the fire station. And all of our budget committee members are here this evening. We're joined tonight by our friends from both the town and the school. Do we have any review or additions to tonight's agenda? One thing I do want to point out, I sent it in an email earlier. We are, before we get into the meat of the agenda tonight with our school review, we do have Ms. Kleiner and folks from the library here that are follow-ups from our last meeting that we had with some updates on some town budget stuff. So we were originally going to do that 14th, but we did not meet. So we'll do that tonight when we get to town business. Seeing no review or additions to tonight's agenda, I will open it for public input. And I will close public input. We will have one more public input session before we adjourn this evening. Next on our agenda is correspondence. Thank you to Mr. Taylor for pulling this together. Quite a lengthy one, so bear with me because it has been a few weeks since we have met as a group. On October 25th, Heather Saman sent special fund balances for September and budgeted revenues for September. On October 26th, Matthew Sullivan sent the October 24th meeting minutes. On October 28th, Renee Burgess sent the invitation to the joint budget school sessions on 11/7, 11/13, and the 11/21 meeting. On October 29th, Julie Darling sent the FY26 school district requested budget, and Bob Leary replied requesting a hard copy. On November 3rd, Kim Kleiner sent an email about RSA 91A2 about notification of meetings. November 5th, Chief Jones sent to the Budget Committee a letter in reference to overtime and part-time officer budgets. On November 7th, Chair Sun forwarded a memo from Kim Kleiner about the 2025 town budget changes. Also on November 7th, Kim Kleiner sent important deadlines for 2025 town meeting. And also on November 7th, Brian O'Connell sent a link to the Google Sheet for budget committee questions. Chairman Sun forwarded that along. November 8th, Holly Falzone shared the FY 2026 salaries and benefits budget. Also on November 8th, Brian O'Connell forwarded the slides that were presented in the November 7th meeting. And also on November 8th, Chair Sun sent an email with the updated meeting schedule and a cancellation of the 11/14 meeting. On November 13th, Carrie Douglas sent an email about tax rate setting, and Chair Sun replied that Mr. Leary and Mr. O'Connor will be addressing questions in upcoming meetings. On November 14th, Mr. Leary emailed with details of the tax rate setting. On November 19th, Chair Sun sent the agenda for tonight's meeting. And then on today, November 21st, Chair Sun forwarded an update from the library about the FY 2025 library budget. Chair Sun forwarded links from Mr. Cutter with the latest budget file for the school as well as the BA report. And then Chair Sun forwarded an email from Kim Kleiner with updates to the FY 2025 town budget to be discussed this evening. That is all of our correspondence since the last time we met. And next on the agenda, we have review and acceptance of minutes from October 24th. Do I have a motion to accept the meeting minutes from October 24th?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Burke, second by Mr. Douglas. Miss Douglas, thank you. See, you're sitting in the wrong spot. It threw me off.
Yeah.
Any questions? All right, seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, abstain. Motion carries 8-0-1. All right, with that, we will move into town business. We're going to kind of skip our normal questions and updates from Mr. Leary. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Kleiner. You all should have received a memo earlier today from Ms. Kleiner that highlighted changes from to the town budget since the last time we met. I'm going to give her an opportunity to walk us through that, answer any questions, and then we have our friends from the library that are here. There was also information passed along that were follow-up questions from the last time we met around the library, and we'll give them a chance to walk us through those and answer any questions on the library as well. We don't have any planned votes for the town tonight, but certainly that is something we can entertain if that's the will of the committee. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Kleiner.
Thank you.
Yep.
So November 6th, I apologize, I kind of gave you a very detailed memo. There was a question about the revenue from the pilot. We did look into that issue, so I laid out that issue. We did change that revenue so that it is up to date. But when we have the revaluation next year, we'll actually enter into a new pilot agreement with the town of Hudson, which will stay constant for 5 years per the statute. So we'll have more information on the next budget, but that was a really good catch. And I'm glad that we researched more into that, so thank you. Today, I kind of walked through from that November 6th memo, and there's really relatively minor changes. So when we got the 2025 health insurance rates, they hadn't been shared with the library before we met. That has now been done. The library has updated theirs, so there was a slight change of a little over $2,000. And then this past Monday, the Board of Selectmen met and we went over the vendor payments, otherwise known as general assistance. And the selectmen decided that they were going to stay with the current system. So by law, we have to fund the line items in order to be able to expense. So they put $1 in each line item for a total of $8. And then they also proposed to put $20,000 into the general assistance expendable trust from the unassigned, and so that will be on the warrant list.
And what would be the reason behind that?
Because we have seen our general assistance budget go up dramatically this year, mainly because of the market house rate increases that you're seeing across southern New Hampshire. And we had some apartment complexes within the town that raised rents significantly, and that impacted some of our residents. There's also been a change last year to the law, which says that now if a resident, someone who has lived in the town for a year, becomes unhoused and they have to go into a shelter or someplace else in another town or another city, that city or that town can then charge back the town. So.
Is there a length on that? So if they live here for a year, is it limited to the year, or is it forever since they staked, put up 10 stakes for a year?
So it's actually not limited.
So if they live here for a year and then they move to Manchester for 15, we could be paying Manchester for 15 years?
Well, no. So a great question. If they became unhoused, and they've lived here, they are deemed a resident of Litchfield. If they remain in shelter housing and there's an actual charge, as long as they are in shelter housing and there's a charge to the, say, city of Manchester for this case, yes, we are picking up that charge. If they became housed in Manchester,
Then it stops.
right, then it stops, right, because now the clock is, they're becoming a resident of Manchester. But that was a law because of what was happening was a lot of the municipalities that do have shelters were getting the impact of those smaller communities that don't have shelters. So we have been fortunate. We've worked very well with both Manchester and Nashua and shared resources. We had, very limited cases where we haven't been able to work out housing for our people. But we did see a substantial increase to the general assistance budget. So I think by putting the money into the expendable trust, we're just making sure that next year, should there be any instances, that the money is there to cover it.
But there's currently a
Otherwise.
balance, though.
Currently, there is. Currently, there's $20,924.
And prior to this law this past year, we would run three to 4,000 on that line. So what would be why 40?
Because this year, we saw a dramatic increase.
And were we not able to absorb it in our underspends throughout the town?
So this year we are, but next year we are concerned that we may not, because the budget is extremely tight. And we don't think that we're gonna have the unfilled positions, say, within the police department that we've had over the past couple years, which has helped us. But this year we saw $30,000 in expense. So, you know, if we had a similar year, the 20 wouldn't be enough.
Well, hopefully economics change in the next year and won't be an issue, so.
We are hoping as well. And it has gotten better towards the end of the year. It was a lot more drastic mid-year. So then we sat with the DRA on Wednesday and did the tax setting process. They adjusted our overlay a little, which happens quite often when we're setting the tax rate. That resulted in a minor change of about $1,700. The Board of Selectmen, when we discussed the proposed budget on Monday, did not make any reductions. So currently, the budget sits at $8,311,444. It's currently $20,548 under the tax cap. Our default budget is $8,155,563. That may have a small change as speaking with the library to make sure that the figure we have for them is correct, but it wouldn't be drastic.
Ms. Kleiner, real quick, can you, in that memo you sent today, the third paragraph, and then the fourth paragraph, so the third paragraph, when you mention the overlay, it says we're 20,556 under the cap, and then the next paragraph says we're 20,548 under the cap. There's a difference of
$8.
$8 there.
The $8 they
Oh,
put
the
in
eight, I got you,
in the
yep.
welfare.
Got it,
Yeah.
thank you.
And then the good news is the unassigned fund balance is $3,175,939. That's 11.23% of the general fund operating expenses. In comparison, last year to 2023 was 2.5, which was only 8.74% of the general fund operating. And as you probably all know, the fund balance policy for the town is between 8 and 12, so we're at 11.23.
Two questions on that. When was the last time the Board of Selectmen updated that policy for 8 to 12%?
2022.
Okay. And of the $2.5 million for the fund balance in 2023, how low did that number get until you were able to gain funding after the March elections?
So, we don't look at it that way. We look at it as year to year as money falls from the budget. So, in 2020, at the end of 2023, tax setting, it was a 2.5. Generally, if you're talking on a cash flow basis, we have never had a situation where we have been below $1 million. So we are very careful. We generally have our tax revenue coming in, and we work out our schedule, say, with the school department to always maintain a healthy balance within the account. This year, because of the tax setting being a little later, we've worked out an arrangement for December to assure the same, but we would never fall below, generally be below $1 million. within the gap.
Other questions for Ms. Kleiner on the memo or any of these updates?
Not necessarily a question, but certainly next time we go over this, I think the committee should take a look at recommending that some of that jump from 8.74 to 11.23 could take care of something like the cruiser.
I was thinking the same, because I'm concerned that it would, given the difference between the two, we're not talking 10,000 this year, it's a sizable difference. I'm concerned you're gonna end up with a default, in which case you get no cruise, but there's no cruiser in the budget. So if you did it with the unassigned fund balance, we could at least start tackling that issue we have of aging cars.
The default difference is about 150K right now.
Yep.
So you will see, in Monday night, the Board of Selectmen being, again, we are pretty well through our list of warrants. We've tried to be proactive this year, and you will see that they are proposing to make some of those expenses from unassigned fund
For the
balance.
warrants.
For the warrant, yes, on the warrant.
So unassigned to avoid some warrants, or
Warrants from unassigned.
And
'cause
remember,
that's
and
the
that
only
means
way-
it
that's the
wouldn't
only way to
impact
move
our
it.
voting on those too. Any other questions for Ms. Kleiner this evening?
I do have one, just for clarification. On the overtime, the chief sent that detailed outline. He mentioned there that it was contractual, the overtime. I wasn't aware that it was contractual.
I would think times are contractual, like excess hours, but they shouldn't be entitled to X number of dollars of overtime.
So I think what the chief is trying to point is that some of the training, some of the coverage for shifts and things of that is contractual to the union contract. So, if they take an officer out of the rotation because that officer has to go to training, there's a minimum amount of officers that need to be, and that is contractual
So
within the
the
union.
majority of it is not contractual.
Yeah, it's not contractual in the sense of each officer is entitled to X amount of
What
overtime,
I'm saying is the
no.
budget committee can cut the overtime.
Yes.
I mean, it's not. that's
I
all.
would think too, we should take a look at how we're staffing, because when we originally expanded the police force, because when I moved to town, it was a much smaller force. When they expanded it, the justification was it would help reduce overtime to cover shift training and other types of things. So are we staffing in the way that was originally intended, or because we have a new chief, are we throwing that to the wayside and seeing overtime we were not originally anticipating when we expanded the force?
But we also had growth in town too, that you have to consider too, right?
But the whole purpose of this was, hey, give us an extra guy and we can reduce overtime. And have we actually seen that? I'm gonna go with no.
So
And then it was doubled down with the SRO pay, but the SRO was going to go ahead.
So we keep expanding on promises that we're not seeing. So I would ask that we take a look at, are we staffing most efficiently and effectively to minimize overtime? Can we stagger shifts? Is there something that can be done to help mitigate it? Listen, looking at the school budget and the town budget, we're looking at some pretty big increases. So what can we do to minimize, in order for you to get what you need, we need to find where we can give the taxpayer a little bit of breathing room. So if there is some some reallocation of resources to still achieve the goal, but do so in a way that reduces overtime, like we were promised, then I think we should
And
go
there's
to the
only one way to
exercise.
reduce overtime, and that's to cut it.
But no, I know, but like, I remember you being on the other side of the table and like, but Harry, it's a bottom line budget. If we cut that, they can still fund it by taking it from somewhere else. So I appreciate that we can cut
I'd rather
overtime.
put it somewhere else,
No, I know, but you and I could do that, but they can still put it wherever they want.
but then it'll come down to them.
Yeah, that's
It's, do you
true.
want a cruiser, do you want overtime? It's like I asked the question before, can you live with one less officer?
Are you and I gonna agree?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Any other questions for Ms. Kleiner this evening?
I do have one request, is there any way that we can get the difference between the 3.175 and the 2.51?
Can you say that again, Mr. Taylor? Sorry.
Yeah, the difference between the 3.175 and the 2.51, can we find out how much of that, based on the increase, was based on head count that was not able to be filled? Because I
So,
look at that more as like, okay, that's a one-time bonus, that you ended up, coming in under budget, but it's not something that we should consider to be predictable. I
Yeah.
would just like to know, as far as that increase, as far as how much extra unassigned fund balance was created, how much of that came from
Our 2023
Unfilled.
unspent.
unfilled personnel.
Yeah, we can attempt to, the only thing I would say, so we can look to see in 2023, at the end of 2023, how many unfilled positions we had and approximate a cost to that.
Well, I'm just looking for
But-
2024. Is there a way to be able to find out in the current budget?
Well, I mean, we had half a year without an officer, so that's half that line budget, right? And then however many other, so we should be able to do vacant positions for X number, and how much.
So if
associated
you're
with it.
looking for how much we
The
expect to
unassigned
have
fund
in excess of the,
Yes.
at the end of this year,
But pre-trip.
to add, that would be added to the
Still
unassigned?
spent it.
No, I
I
don't
assume
think,
that's probably already part of this, 3.175 million, because you have more that'll go to unassigned, because in 2024, you didn't spend it on it, right?
So this is the balance at tax setting time. So this would have been from unspent funds in 2023 that would have attributed. The amount that we have left in the 2024 budget would be added to this, and you would see that at 2025 tax
Okay,
setting
and yes,
time.
if we could find out as far as how much of that balance growth came off the backs of unfilled positions.
in 2023.
In
Yes,
2023,
exactly.
Right.
yes.
Anything else for Ms. Kleiner? All right, let's turn it over to Vicky. I don't know if you want to come up and share anything. I do want to, if you give me just a second, let me
This is not
find
conducive to.
the, you all should have received earlier today updated information from the library. There was a link that took to updates from the library to their budget, as well as some questions that were asked from the last time we met. There was a document that was attached comparing the differences between Hoopla and Libby, and those details were outlined in the memo that was in there. Vicki, I'll turn it over to you if you want to kind of walk us through that at a high level, and then let people ask any questions they may have.
Okay, so Hoopla and Libby are two different products on two different platforms with different business models. I know the overall question seemed to be where do we get the most bang for our buck? And that is with Libby. So, Libby offers ebooks, audiobooks, and magazines. Hoopla offers ebooks, audiobooks, graphic novels, movies, TV series, and music. So there's some different products there. Libby, which is the state consortium of 204 libraries, goes by a licensing fee per copy of a book. And depending on the publisher, it's all very convoluted. It can be for a license for 24 circulations, or it can be a license for 1 year, 2 years, and the price varies for all of that. With Hoopla, it's pay as you go. So whenever somebody borrows an audiobook, we are charged a certain amount for that audiobook. With Libby, it's one copy for one person at a time. So if Kim borrows a book, I can't borrow the same book, so we can do book club together. But on Hoopla, we could do that. You can have multiple people checking out a book at the same time. And that's why the cost is higher for Hoopla. So our fee that we get assessed from the state consortium is based on our population, our history of circulation. It's also based on how many registered users we have, how many active users, and it all boils down to we are charged 0.6% of the total state budget. And we are, out of 204, we're the 42nd highest user, just for The fees per download with Hoopla, they vary. They don't just vary on format, audiobook to music or whatever. They can also vary on title. So older books would cost less than brand new bestsellers, so to speak. So,
Do those fees come back to the library?
yes. So what we do is we put a certain amount of money into the account and then it spends down. And right now, our average cost per circulation is $2.46, where the cost per circulation under Libby is 27 cents. So that's definitely a better buy, but it's, you know, people can't get what they want when they want it. So if they want a bestseller, it could be the state has to buy 12 copies in order to feed that hold list. But, you know, they're gonna have to wait their turn on, and it can be a year. I think you've been on for a year. It just depends on how quickly people read the book and turn it back in. It's, you know,
I mean,
can't
that's
go
how-
out again.
That's how
It's like-
libraries used to operate, right? There was a wait
Right.
list, a hold
Right.
list.
That's true, but, you know, we've got all these people. The other thing with cost with, both formats is the publishers charge outrageous amounts of money for the digital copies compared to what consumers pay and compared to what our model is under print. Like, we get a 45% discount off of retail price on print. You look at these formats, a book that we'll pay $17 for to get digital is $55. A book that we pay $27 for as an audiobook, it's $84. So they're really taking advantage of the new formats and making digital resources difficult to be cost effective unless we're under a consortium like we are, where everybody's pooling their money in and getting better value. So, I know if you look at holdings, that was in here too, like Libby has 33,842 titles. And, oh, that's the wrong number, there are 83,046 copies. So 33,000 distinct titles, but because they have to buy extra copies of it to feed the holds list, that bumps it up. Where Hoopla has 1.5 million titles in 115 languages that, you know, you can have right away. So, part of the reason why we have done Hoopla is for situations where we can't get the book for them on Libby because we have just, the state has a limited number of titles that they can buy, so they can't get every single bestseller that's, you know, come out. But Hoopla will have it for them. So they have more titles, but they don't necessarily have the same titles, so they kind of intertwine with each other. Let's see, was there something else on here? Oh, in the last 12 months, the state has done 2 million circs statewide with the 204 libraries.
So if I could maybe at a high level summarize.
Sure.
And please correct me if I'm wrong, for a $2,000 increase to add Hoopla,
That's just the fee for using it, isn't it?
correct.
That's the
the-
money that we would put in to
Right.
draw off of as
Right.
people borrow.
And you get roughly 1,000 rentals or so out of that.
Yes.
Would it be possible just to charge, like, pass the rental fee on to the user?
Those-
We're really not allowed to do that. And by statute, libraries are to be free.
That was
On
gonna
the
be my
Libby
question.
side of things, is there any way to limit how long somebody can hold?
There is a limit. Oh,
So
how,
that
I'm
at
sorry.
least the hold then gets cut down. So like in the old days, you know, you ended up checking out a book, you got it for like a week, and you had to return.
Right.
In this case, you can shut it off after a week.
It does.
If it's digital.
You have a 2-week period to
2 week,
read,
okay.
and then it goes away. So you get a little message that says your book is due in 3 days, hurry up.
And then you just turn on aircon.
And this is very
Airplane
helpful.
mode.
So for that amount of money, you get access to about 10 times the amount of content that's available, correct? Ballpark.
Right.
Okay.
But that extra content and flexibility, if I'm reading the last page correctly, only benefits a third of the patrons.
Correct.
Correct.
Yes, Libby is the hands down what we would want to keep.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions for the library this evening? Okay.
My only other comment is, you all took $3,069 out to put us back to our previous budget, to the 2024 budget, and only 2,000 of that was hoopla. So the 1,069 includes the increase to Libby of $885, and then smaller increases to our other 5 digital services. So I would ask that that portion of the money could be put back into the budget so we aren't losing services.
Which portion of the money?
The 1,069,
How much was the requested increase for additional staff hours? Because I thought that's what the 3,069.
no, that was
Yeah, it was different.
2,660.
Yeah. Any other questions this evening? Any motions this evening?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
On Parks and Rec 45-2010, I'd like to make a motion.
That was a curveball I wasn't
Yeah.
expecting.
Add
I'll catch up.
$5,312 to the budget, please.
Can you say that again, sorry?
Yes,
Parks
Parks
and
and Rec, account 52-2010. I'd like to add $5,312 to the budget.
$5,312. It sounds like a very familiar amount. Do I have a second?
For
Second by
discussion.
Mr. Barca, motion by Mr. Cutter, second by Mr. Barca. Discussion?
The discussion is, this is the return of the funds for the porta potties.
No.
That were reduced from the budget.
Why?
Why? Because out of all the cuts, this is very petty of the budget committee to cut. And you think that the coordination amongst these various rec committees is going to happen for porta potties is false. It's not going to happen.
I
Well,
would
since-
greatly
Hold on,
disagree because
One
I have
person at a
seen
time.
it happen in action as a board member of a sports league. And then Mr. LaPlante, I won't speak for you, but I believe you said at the time, you had had some conversations with some of the recreational sport boards.
LYSL said they would, the president said he would
I
cover.
made the motion at the soccer league to,
Yeah.
we'll pay for the porta potties.
So, and the reality
Two
is,
fields, and it's already been voted on.
and most of the people are, let's face it, the same people who volunteer in one sport volunteer in the other sports. They're already talking. So I take offense to the idea of this being a petty cut. I understand this is a personal cut, but I don't know that it's necessarily petty.
Any additional discussion?
The one thing that the children use in town is cutting. It's ridiculous.
No, we're not.
So feel free to make a donation.
This is where it gets
We're not
outrageous.
cutting it.
It's not a cut.
Okay.
It's a reallocation.
Question has been called. Roll call vote. Mr. Taylor.
No.
Mr. LaPlante.
No.
Mr. Hayes.
Absolutely not.
Mr. Leary.
Yes.
Mr. Barca.
Yes.
I am a no. Ms. Douglas.
No.
Mr. Burke.
No.
And Mr. Cutter.
Yes.
Motion fails 3-6. Any additional motions this evening?
Make a motion to add $985 to the library budget.
A
Second.
motion by Mr. Barca, second by Mr. Cutter. Discussion?
Just to add Libby back, the increase to Libby.
Any additional discussion? Roll call vote. Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. LaPlante?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
Mr. Barca?
Yes.
I am a yes. Ms. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
And Mr. Cutter?
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0-0. Any additional motions this evening?
I'd like to make one.
Yes.
Like Club cut police overtime by $50,000.
Police overtime, do you have that number in front of you? Can you just read it out loud? Police overtime by 50,000.
I'll second.
Second, a motion by Mr. Burke, second by Ms. Douglas.
What's the total?
Now we're coming it up.
I know. Give me just 1 second, let me find the budget.
4210.
4210?
Yeah, 4210.
Discussion.
Yeah, as we discussed,
Thank you, ladies.
when the chief was in last, they were adding 1.5 police officers, which I'm not sure if they're filled right now, but they said they would be filling. And Gary mentioned earlier, I mean, for years, we've been talking about if we get a full police force, if we have this, we're gonna cut overtime. We haven't cut overtime. So I asked the question too, is like, do we need less officers or more vehicles? So I wanna cut 50,000 and later on, put it in towards the vehicle. Because the argument, it was like stated a couple meetings ago, there were 2 police cruisers that were at access to the police department. So I think we do need new vehicles, we need to find the money somewhere. So if we don't have vehicles, we don't need police officers.
So you're talking between the 50,000 reduction and the 20,000 that's left under the cap? Aren't you still short a little?
No, they can find a few dollars.
Question,
This overtime has just not gone down. And the only way I think it's gonna go down is for us to cut it.
question for Ms. Kleiner, Ms. White, Mr. Larry. In 2023, we had a spend in this line item of $131,487. Off the top of your head, how many unfilled positions did we have with that spend of overtime?
At least 2.
Several.
Was it 2 or 3?
Yeah.
7?
1 point,
I mean, throughout the year, what do we?
2023?
Mhm.
Yeah, we had like 7 positions.
So that, okay.
That was in the midst of the.
Turmoil?
Okay.
yes.
So I
That was
mean,
the highest.
even if it was, yeah. So that, my point in that is the spend that year with the highest amount of unfilled positions that we've had is the same ask that we have in this year's budget for overtime. Essentially, it's less than $1,000 less. That's what I was trying to get at. Okay.
And we have 7
But-
more full-time police officers this year versus 2023?
Are we fully staffed at the moment?
No, we still have 2 that openings that they're looking at. But to cut it 50,000, you're going back below anything we've seen in the last 6 years.
That's the point, though. That's the whole reason why we added officers, was to help get control of the overtime number, to
And
bring it
SRO.
down. The whole point was the SRO and the full complement was going to pay for itself in the reduction of overtime.
But
So now we have the ad, but we haven't seen the corresponding reduction.
But the certification requirements for officers and the training for officers has increased, and that's state
But that's a different,
mandated.
that's a different budget line item though, right? That, there's a PD overtime training budget, so wouldn't that come out of that one? For trainings and certifications and any of that? Cause I see line items in there
I
about,
think it's a double
It's a
edge,
double
right?
edge,
It's a double
yeah.
edge, because you got the training, but overtime is for the officer who has to go to training. 'Cause
Right.
he's gonna probably do it on an off shift.
coverage.
Then you have the coverage that's coming out of the overtime and vice versa.
Okay, thank you.
I don't speak out of turn, but that's a significant.
No, thank you, I appreciate the context. Go ahead, no, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say that the two positions that aren't filled are in this budget though, right?
Yes.
So the money's there.
Yes.
I agree that I would like to see this cut. I think 50 is a bit high. I'm gonna make a motion to amend Mr. Burke's motion and reduce PD wages overtime officers by $25,000.
Second.
Second, motion by Mr. Sun, second by Mr. Barca. I just, discussion, I feel, to Ms. Kleiner's point, you know, even going back to 2020, you know, that our spend was 96, then 112, then 114, 131. I understand the unfilled positions that we had at the time. I also understand your logic, Brian, of trying to get closer to the cruiser. I just feel like that is too steep of a cut to start with. I'm comfortable with getting us, you know, close to 100K on this. Any additional discussion on the motion to amend?
Without the chief here to defend his overtime line, I would
That was said last time, Bob, at the last meeting, and then he sent his report.
And any motions or votes tonight, we certainly have opportunities to revisit those between now and deliberative. Any additional discussion? All right, so we are voting on the motion to amend. Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. LaPlante,
Yes.
Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Mr. Barca.
Yes.
I am a yes. Ms. Douglas,
No.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
and Mr. Cutter.
No.
Motion to amend carries 7-2, so we'll vote on the reduction of $25,000. Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. LaPlante,
Yes.
Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
No.
Mr. Barca.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
And Mr. Cutter?
No.
Motion carries 7-2. Everybody's sitting out of order, it's throwing me off. Any additional motions this evening? Okay,
So whatever's my motion was made.
So that one got changed to
Denied.
25. So
What was
your
that?
motion got
Was the
changed.
motion, then it was second.
it was, so
Right.
Don't know.
we amended your original motion, and yeah, you don't have to take it back, no. Any additional motions, discussions, anything on the town side this evening? Okay, thank you all. All right, switching gears to the next part of our agenda. Thank you to our friends from the school for sitting through our discussions on the town side. We had some unfinished business there. At this point in time, just to update everybody watching live or watching later, where we are in our school budget review process, we've held 2 joint meetings with the school board, where members of the budget committee had an opportunity to attend those, watch, ask questions in person, ask questions via the shared Google Sheet. The vast majority of those questions have been asked and answered, either in person or on the Google Sheet. I know Mr. Barca had one today that was sent in and I think is being looked at or has been answered. Tonight's purpose is to kind of finalize our review process. There are no motions, there is no voting tonight on the school side. It's an opportunity for our full budget committee meeting and a meeting that we facilitate to go through each of the schools and departments, to ask any questions that we have not had the opportunity to ask. It's also important why we structured it this way and did not meet, thank you ladies, did not meet on the 14th is because the school board met last night and took action and made some reductions to the budget, which was shared in information from Mr. Cutter today. So you have that. Everyone also has updated sheets that the superintendent passed around that, correct me if I'm wrong, reflects all the changes from last night. They do. Thank you. So our flow tonight, if you look at our agenda, towards the bottom of the agenda on page 2 is the flow that we will use tonight. We will go GMS, LMS, CHS. We'll go HR, food service, buildings and grounds, business, SAU, curriculum, technology, special services, and end with salaries and benefits. So that is the schedule we will use. I'm not going to go line by line. We'll start with GMS. I will ask, are there any questions on the budget for GMS? It's an opportunity for any member of the budget committee to ask Mr. Mitchell or anyone on the team questions. We'll work through those and then we'll move to the next section of the budget. Okay, so that's how we'll flow this evening. Any questions on the process? Mr. O'Connell? Yes.
I don't have to, but just a quick overview of last night's work.
That's exactly where I was going to go next. So yes, please.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, this is a build off the slideshow we've done before at the bottom. So if you have questions back to other schools, we'll revert back up to those previous slides for those. So these are new slides for today. So just, I'll do this quickly, not quickly, it's the same entire run view from before. The voted on warrant budget from last year was almost $26 million from FY25. Our initial, for just purposes of explanation, we'll call it the superintendent budget, the budget we brought to the school board and to the budget committee for the joint meetings. Our initial proposal was about $27.6 million for an increase of about $1.7 million. School board did some work with it. We reduced that request down to $27.5 with an increase of about $1.6. We still have some significant drivers of interest, you'll see some, of increase, you'll see something crossed out, I'll explain that in a moment. But some of our locked-in expenses, restoration of bottom lines, specialized instruction, and other personnel. So these are the locked-in expenses that we talked about before. You see a couple of slight adjustments as we adjusted salaries for non-union personnel. It has a slight effect on benefits, spit out words. And then we got some slight updates in some of our utility pricing, so those are reflected here in this budget right here. So anything that was crossed out was part of that initial proposal in the superintendent budget. You'll see below it the new line based upon those small adjustments. Some of them were very small, some are bigger, we'll get to that as we go through. And then the reflected benefits reduction, sorry, we're working on a one-day turnaround, so we didn't break it out by the different categories. Overall, that benefit reduction came to a little over $4,000. Restoration of bottom line, same as we had before, this is just, that is, restoring those bottom line cuts from before. We haven't touched specialized instruction yet, so that total remains the same in those three particular areas. And other personnel, school board voted last night to reduce the increase in related to these lines last night at the school board meeting, particularly in the salary area, so that reduced that other personnel line from where it was before, about $144,000 increase to $123,000 increase. We also eliminated what was in the budget in regards to the LMS parking lot, addressing it. We talked at the school board meeting about pulling this out of the proposed budget and possibly introducing something related to it in a warrant article for the town to vote on. Whether that be a study, whether that be a project, we're working on that part of it. But that cost came out of the budget we had it in initially. We talked about this was a possibility at the different meetings. The school board acted on that last night. So to summarize these kind of big drivers over again, we're talking the big view picture of it. These big things total about almost $1.8 million. The increase, as we proposed it, is about 1.6. That drivers I just highlighted there quickly, but those drivers I highlighted, those major ones, is almost 1.8 million. And that difference of everything else not included in those big drivers, we see a small reduction in those related lines compared to where the budget currently is for this fiscal year. So that was a quick overview of the work and big viewpoint of where we were last night. We can revert back to the slides. We haven't updated the individual building slides. We just, based upon our time constraints today.
Yep.
So some of those numbers might be slightly different based upon the reductions that the school board made last night in the particular lines. All your sheets are correct in here. If you see something referred to those slides, you're more focused on the sheets being correct and going back to those.
Yep, thank you.
Superintendent, if I could just jump in,
Yes.
right, for a moment. We're up in our budget, right, there's no question about it, but I wanna reiterate the fact that we're up. The vast majority of that increase is contractual and voter approved, right? We had the LSSA contract last year and we had the teacher contract last year. That is reflected in this budget, right? The large amount of the increases is contractual, voter approved. That's what's driving the vast majority of these increases that you're seeing this year.
Okay, but can we go to the slide that goes to 6 items? There we go. Item 2, Mr. Cutter.
Yep.
Restoration of the FY '25 bottom line.
Yeah. And we took up.
That's a, you're putting that back in as an increase. Look, I can understand as far as like salaries, transportation, things that are contracted. I can agree with you that, you know what, the voters decided that $1 million increase. But just because we cut in 2025, why then should that automatically be put back in as a first step when we could learn from the fact that, you know what, some of these cuts may not have needed to be restored, and why isn't it looked at in terms of the FY '25 budget stands alone? What do you need?
It was a starting point, right? And then from there, like you see attrition added back in of 150,000, but then we reduced a number of para positions that we didn't need, right? The superintendent then took this number and reduced 10 para positions from that budget. So while you see this as an addition, what you don't see here is the fact that then we subtracted out 10 paras.
Okay, can you give me a breakdown in terms of the cuts that you made?
Yeah.
That would offset this $445,000?
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So the paraprofessional cut is about, don't quote me the exact amount, I can get that for you, it's about 210,000.
Okay.
So it's roughly that personnel number that was reduced down from there, we restored it. There was a special services cut in the transportation line. It's not significant, but that was some of the cut there. We went from having 3 buses for one of our out-of-district placements down to 2. That saves a significant chunk of that. I can get you the exact amount for that. Attrition, we didn't see $150,000 attrition downgrade from last year. We saw about 100. You know? So that was something we wanted to put that back at that 0 line, right? We're getting dangerous putting attrition cuts into education budgets. We're just not seeing.
It's tales all the time, and Mr. Cutter, when he was the chairman
Yeah.
and was part of the budget committee, the attrition cut was something that was pretty much automatic year after year.
It was, but I can happily say, and I'm delighted to say, the climate and culture in our schools is at an all-time high since I have been within the school district and on this side of the table, right? I don't see the attrition numbers being anywhere that we've seen on the budget committee, and I don't believe in an attrition cut this year. I don't see it happening.
And I do think with attrition, it's difficult from where we are in education. The reality of hiring teachers, hiring teachers and that being harder and harder is really true. We're not seeing the same number of young educators entering the field, which is where you would get some of that attrition from, right? You have a retiring teacher who's been in the profession for 40+ years, top of everything, right? You hire them with someone out of college, there's a significant difference in that part of hire. We're just not seeing, this is not unique to Litchfield, this is the education world. We're just not seeing as many young people getting into the field of education for one reason or another. So when we have to fill positions, we're taking, it's not that let's hire the newbie,
Yep,
right?
that's fine.
And
Can you guys provide then, before we get to the end of voting, when typically the attrition cut comes in?
Yeah.
Can you explain in terms of what you're seeing in terms
Yeah.
of that gap closing?
Yep.
So for example, and I'll just use a round number, if in the past we used $70,000 per person for attrition, and you're telling me now that that person retiring versus the person coming in is only a $25,000 difference.
Yeah.
Then that's gonna make a big difference in terms of how we figure out what that attrition number might be.
Yeah, we can break that out.
So
a
yeah,
little
if
bit
you
more,
can
definitely.
help us with that information as far as
Yeah.
how much that's closed up, I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah, we have the raw numbers available. I don't have them on my fingertips.
No,
right
no,
now,
no,
but
that's more for like at the
Yeah.
end voting, when you
Yeah.
get to the very last night of voting, if you
Yeah.
can provide some insight on that by then,
Yeah,
that'd be
definitely.
fantastic.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Mr. O'Connell, was that the end of kind of your high level?
Yeah,
overview?
I flew through that.
No, it's fine.
Don't visit, 'cause I would imagine we're gonna ask a lot.
Yeah, I think we're gonna get into a lot of questions here. I wanted to, if there's any other high-level questions as it pertains to the drivers, as it pertains to anything that Mr. O'Connell has talked about, or Mr. Cutter, I didn't know if you wanted to speak to high-level any of the cuts that were made last night before we jump into this part of it.
I do, and there was a link that was shared by Chairman Sun earlier today that I had shared, right? And it provides the budget committee with an overview of the reductions that the school board made last night. The superintendent kind of talked a little bit about some of these motions, but we've actually provided the section within the handouts that you received tonight, the page number, the accounts, as well as the actual specific amounts that were reduced. So very transparent, as you're going through the budget, what was reduced. Some of the bigger ones, as the superintendent mentioned, were the LMS parking lot that came out, the legal line underneath the school board was reduced by 20,000. And then essentially, there were actually some lines that we increased because some of these lines we actually really felt were under budgeted based upon past expenses, notably regarding like GMS boiler repair, some of the CHS HVAC and boiler repair lines. We really felt that they were underfunded based upon the past few years and expenses in some of those lines.
If I'm reading this correctly, you had about 30 motions last night that you all went through for a reduction of $105,880.
Correct, and there was a $500 adjustment actually that the business administrator identified today. One of the motions was actually withdrawn, so in the email I sent to you, Chairman Sun, I actually had indicated 106,000 in reductions. The $500 was pulled out of that because that was a withdrawn motion last night.
Got it. That was for
row 4 CHS supplies for art.
Got it.
Yeah, that was
I see it.
withdrawn.
Yep. Thank you. All right, if there's no other high-level questions, we'll jump into GMS as our first review. In the packet that you got, I think it was CHS, LMS, then GMS, so you may have to dig down to the third paperclip stack there. GMS budget is up by $8,972. You can see, Mr. Mitchell, I'll certainly turn it over to you, or Mr. O'Connell, if you want to. Certainly don't have to read these. If there's one or two things you want to highlight. It does say, okay, the 12.8, and what we see here, the 8,972 is correct, right? As far as the increase goes,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay.
So can I ask a question before we start about
Yeah.
that? So when we were here last week, your increase was 1504, and the difference is emergency management has disappeared off your budget.
I can.
That's just someone that appears in mine, but I don't actually.
I apologize. So emergency management was in the building level, and then I realized it was also in the business section. So I just moved everything to the business section so that the district-wide as well as the building level emergency management is all in one spot.
It's too bad because you will save $7,000.
I'll give the credit to.
Questions on the GMS budget? Any questions for Mr. Mitchell or the team this evening?
I think one of the things that we talked about, was this under GMS or the repairs, was some of the repair lines that we're gonna
Building
make.
and grounds.
That was the BG budget, yeah.
I mean, related to that, you'll notice that most of my increases do have to do, they're building adjacent, if you will, they have to do with furniture and furnishings.
One of the things I think you noted, Mr. Mitchell, in the joint sessions was that your student count was down. So when you looked at some of the like the supplies and things that were down from previous years was due to the fact that you were accounting for less students. Correct?
Yeah, so we see a small population decrease, and that actually more than accounts for even a 3% kind of inflationary increase in rate. So most of those lines come down. It's in the bigger ones, it has a bigger impact, and the smaller ones, it has a smaller impact. So you see a lot of the negatives, but then, yeah.
It's furniture, comes down to it.
It really, yeah, it comes down to furniture and furnishings. Some of those are based on building needs, and some of those are actually based on the life of some of the pieces of furniture that are just, as we talked about, classroom rugs. You want to be replacing those on a regular basis. We have a big piece of furniture that's in one of our specialized rooms that's, we moved it last year, and it's kind of like when you move that old dresser in the house that one last time. It lives there now, and if you move it again, so.
Any questions for GMS?
Are we allowed, so it has to be fire rated rug though, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
is there, I guess, is there a reason to not use carpet tiles? Because tile floor is so much easier to clean. Kid spews or like bleeds. Like why would you want major, large carpets? So difficult to clean.
It's not whole classroom carpet. We're talking about the rug area for elementary, like the meeting area,
Where the kids
where they
sit.
sit on.
Like small group stuff.
Circle time.
So carpet tiles, like a stack of carpet tiles, like when we were kids.
They're usually designated as a different spot, right? Like even if the room is carpeted, there is like a learning carpet space.
It's a 15 by 15-ish,
Now, I just remember going to the stack of carpet tiles and bring it over, and then you could move it wherever you needed into the classroom. It just, looking at ways to try to
Well, then I'm gonna ask for
effectively.
closets to then hold the carpet tile.
And she missed my stack in the corner comment. So, I just, knowing that we're looking at increases, are there ways to more cost effectively do what we need to do? Have we shopped around on our furniture? Are we just ordering the same furniture year after year? Can we, I know
Actually,
you'll
notice in the classroom furniture,
Yeah.
that if you compare it to last year's, we found a better rate on student desks and chairs.
Well, because when we get to the high school, I'm like, I know the lab tables and my lab chairs in my school are $20 a pop, not 75 or whatever it is. So I'm just saying, there's ways to. Are we shopping around for the best, most effective way to
Yeah.
accomplish what we need?
I think that's a good question. I think in general, we try to factor in use and abuse too,
Right.
right? Like you get for what you pay for. You
Well,
buy
I have
cheaper
nice
desks,
metal
cheaper
chairs. Yeah, so I'm just saying, there's.
I will say though, and I explained this in years past, for instance, the student desks and chairs, we're replacing now because years before I got there, they were replaced with lower quality. They were replaced with the plastic box and pressed particle board top, and those can handle about 2 spills. And then all of a sudden, the pressed particle isn't so pressed anymore. So
the
we're
kids
actually
start
replacing
picking
them
at it. Yeah, we've
with
had a few of those.
the carbon plastic, and the metal desks, and they have a longer life. And we've been going with one vendor and we get the good price. Now we've actually looked at a vendor that we actually didn't even know provided this. They were just in the general educational furniture space, and they've come in with actually a much lower price
Okay.
and options.
Any other questions for GMS this evening? All right, let's move to LMS. LMS currently has an increase from last year of $46,000. Ms. Grantham, anything you'd like to speak to on that?
So there were a couple of things that between last night and previous budget, the first thing I wanted to just take a quick second to speak to is the idea of, over the course of the past, my 3 years as principal prior to this year, we were advised to present a lean budget, and then also as the budget came, I would say there was a spending freeze, but we were encouraged to be very prudent in spending with some of the difficulties with big things in the budget, and we all know that I'm not gonna go back and rehash the old times.
Nah.
But, we were advised to be lean. So the budget I'm presenting to you today are things that we have not purchased over the past several years because of that lean sake. So yes, it is an increase, but there are things, for example, I don't know if anybody saw Litchfield What's Up this week, but that was one of the places where we have been replacing one uniform a year, which isn't enough according to both our students and our coaches.
My understanding though, the driver of that was we changed mascots.
We
We
did.
went from
3 years
the
ago.
Raiders to the Lynx,
Correct.
and part of that swap out is that to update all the uniforms. Not necessarily that we are,
So there's a uniform replacement cycle chart that I have, that shows that, you know, when uniforms were last replaced, for example, in my budget for this year, cheerleading uniforms were on the docket to be replaced. Last time they'd been replaced was in 2015, and they are janky to the next level. Imagine uniforms that have been worn for 9 years by any athlete. It's not good. Cheerleading uniforms are not cheap. Tops and bottoms run about $4,000. That's a ballpark. For a team of 15 kids, that's a lot.
For cheerleading?
For cheerleading.
On the cheerleading field.
Right now, I just left the gym with 21 kids in there. We're back up. We went from having a cheerleading squad of 3,
Well, it's all good.
we recovered.
so,
Go.
Many games, like 4 of them.
Yes.
so do we have a booster club that helps fundraise with that?
We do not have an LMS booster club at this time. You know, is that something that I'm definitely willing to entertain and discuss? I think that's a possibility, but that was one of the places, one of the drivers that did increase to be able to support. So that when I went back to that chart and say, you know, these are the uniforms that were purchased in 2021, through both, and at that time it was, everybody needed the same thing. So it was replace every sport. Some of the sports since have been replaced. Volleyball was replaced in 2022. Lacrosse had new uniforms in 2023. LMS Baseball did a whole fundraising thing themselves last year through Mr. Totten, where they were able to get a batting cage and their own uniforms for baseball. It's not that I was putting more money to baseball and not softball. I like both and want both of them to get their uniforms. It's just a question of how do we go about that cycle in a fair and equitable way for all of our student athletes.
So I guess if we needed new uniforms for the rebranding of the school, was it responsible then to go add 2 sports in boys and girls lacrosse, which added additional cost to LMS when there was a dire need to basically clothe the
Those-
existing sports?
Those uniforms were self-funded. They were purchased by the lacrosse
You still have to pay for transportation, you still have to pay for referees and things like that. That's all not self-funded.
Is that a Title IX issue?
Not if we didn't have the sport to begin
It was a boys and a
with.
girls lacrosse, so,
We did not have a team and then we had a team. There's no Title IX there.
and we created a team for
But I was saying if you
gender,
had
so
one,
that
if you
takes
had
that
one
out.
and didn't have the other.
Or you could have just not added either.
So that is one of
Until you got to the point where, you know what, the rebranding of the school and the uniforms could have been taken care of, and then it could have been addressed at that point as far as expanded services to do 2 additional sports.
Or you would do it, came together, the communities come together and pulled together funding. So we're talking a number of athletes who are involved in, you know, parents are involved in the community. I'm sorry, $4,000 for uniforms for like 15 to 20 kids when we are short books in some classes because apparently they're moldy. We have academic concerns that I would encourage people, if uniforms are your thing
You're right.
and your passion, start the booster club, do the bake sales, do the fundraising.
I think when we look at athletics in general, I'm just gonna talk about it, right?
I was a student athlete, so I feel you.
No, like, I think what we try to establish from a school perspective, just to give you like a viewpoint of it, is what is our responsibility as a school to outfit students with versus what are extras to outfit kids with, right? So, like, I'll just give you my personal opinion, like, I feel like a school should outfit students with a baseline uniform, right? Like, a home and away, whether it's a reversible or 2 different colors, complete uniform, whatever that would be. If they wanna go above and beyond that, you'll see basketball kids, for example, with warm-ups or shooting shirts or this or case. I think that's when you use your avenues of fundraising and booster clubs and so on and so forth to do that. So I think when we kind of build this budget, we're trying to weigh what is our responsibility as a school. I don't think any of us, I hope none of us will dispute the importance of co-curriculars, you know, and how they value and add to the educational programming. So what, if we're gonna offer those co-curriculars, is important to include it in that package of what we will finance as a school versus what are those extras. You know, we were talking with one of the basketball coaches today, and she had some good questions about shooting shirts and warm-ups, and one of the discussions was, well, what if I didn't get names on them and then the school took them on, right? I appreciate that, but now that we're liable in budget, from a budgetary standpoint of refilling that, so I would caution you not to do that. I would say, look, if you buy this shirt, it is yours, right?
Yep.
And you're gonna do that away from the school budget, and then we're not running into, you know, Title IX issues or equity issues or anything along those lines. We're not encumbering that into our commitment to financing that type of thing. But I love the enthusiasm and the idea of trying to support the student athletes and just parsing that out with our different programs and our coaches to make sure we're being responsible from the school standpoint, but allowing that room for extras as people want to kind of pursue.
Just to speak, our spring sports last year had over 156 participants, so it's not just 15 kids we're talking about, with the addition of boys and girls lacrosse, with boys baseball, girls softball,
Sure,
and
but
track
you
and field.
said it was $4,000 for 15 uniforms.
But those are
For cheerleading.
from 9 years ago, the last time we
It's
purchased
still
them.
$4,000 for 15 kids. So to me, like, then now we get blue shorts, you get for 15, 20 bucks and a nice shirt. To me, I think we need to take a look at how can we outfit middle school sports, high school sports in a way that is uniform, but also is respectful to the taxpayer who apparently, as we're here, we're supporting more and more of them through the welfare program, through the food banks and the other stuff. How do we go to the person who can't afford their food and say, yeah, I know, but we need to spend $300 a cheerleading uniform? So to me, there's a balance there that has to be struck.
Certainly don't want to leave the sports uniform conversation, but a couple of things. I think with, and Mr. Barkett got this, I'll give him credit. I think with the GMS and the LMS budget, the even number of pages did
I
not
just noticed that.
did not print.
Right.
I spot checked it. I think all the rest of them are fine.
Yeah.
So if
That's where all the hidden money is.
if we could get, we obviously
1.7.
can't have it tonight, but if we could get maybe an electronic update for GMS and LMS.
It is updated.
Absolutely.
Oh, online?
Yeah, all that one seemed fine.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All
I'm
right.
happy to pick up a copy
Perfect.
on Monday, if you're somebody else.
Disregard that request then. So then, my second question, or my second comment, question
Still a vast
for,
improvement.
question for, Ms. Grantham, let's see, this is under 738, counseling, school counseling services, 738, equipment replaces, it's the FM system for the 6 classes?
Yep.
I know you had it up there. So this one has an increase of $6,500.
Yes.
Last year, the budget was 2,000, now it's 8,500. My question is, it says year 2 of 4?
Right.
So what's the big jump with, from year 1 to year 2?
So it's a change in practice and thought and philosophy. It mimics, it's all Dan's fault, is what I'm gonna look down the kids and say.
I said kids expected with FM systems and.
So did your kids coming from GMS?
Correct. As kids are transitioning from elementary to middle, and one of our big goals as part of the school board and part of our district is making those transitions smooth and even for kids, so it's not like, culture shock when they get to middle school. At all of the elementary schools, classrooms, they have an FM system for students. It's a good educational practice across the board. We had a student that came in this year that required them in 5th grade, which then I would be transitioning those units up to 6th grade next year, and then if I get a 4th grader coming in 5th grade, I'm gonna have to buy new. So it's a question of either picking up and moving all these FM systems and tracking them from child to child, or they were purchased for 5th grade this year, next year I'll purchase them for 6th grade, the year after I'll purchase them for 7th grade, and then any kids that are coming up from GMS will already have those units in their rooms as they
So
go.
does the device follow the kid? So when they go from 5th to 6th to 7th, or?
Yes.
Oh, so it's,
Yeah,
so they
so-
haven't, but it doesn't leave GMS to LMS, right? You.
No,
No.
so we actually have it as part of the standing operating, but there are certain students have now had that kind of written in as part of their plan, that they have it. And now we provide it as a general accommodation,
Okay.
where they haven't, so now it's become part of an accommodation, so now it's rolled up into the middle school.
And
So
then-
it's a
Unfortunately-
combination of a special education service and a 504 service, so it's meeting a requirement that we have to provide anyhow, it's just now a question of, rather than have our IT department and our staff have to run around and move the towers from one room to the next room as we're going through, it's just,
Yeah, it's not a good use of time. I agree with that.
So why isn't this, instead of at your budgets, why wouldn't, and if it's tied to a plan, why wouldn't we have it as part of special ed? So that way, anybody that's coming into the district, like there's one central location that tracks all 12 grades and identifies who needs it, and that way you three don't have to sit there and juggle around like, oh, hold on, I'm giving you 2 and you're giving him 3.
It's not
and-
always a special ed
Yeah.
thing. There's also some students that don't have an IEP that require it, that would fall under 504. So it's, like Jen said, a little bit double dipping sometimes where, what category it can fall into.
I think there's a general practice that schools are shifting towards where it just makes from a financial long-term standpoint to outfit every room with an FM station, FM hearing thing in a progressive way, right? I know in my previous district, that was a plan we had in place as well. Because as we see this accommodation being used more frequently, it's just harder juggling all the different machines in different years, and you wanna get them in a rotation so you keep them going in a consistent way. I mean, they have a pretty good lifespan once you get them into classes.
Are there grants available?
Some related to this, like in the special ed, just in general.
Yep. Have we applied for any?
Well, we got all our title grants, and most of those are tied up, already fully committed with other resources that we're utilizing them for, you know? This could potentially fall under some of those grants, but we'd be sacrificing other things.
No, we couldn't apply for additional grants for them?
No, with the title grants, we're given an amount.
So there are no other, because a quick search didn't indicate there might be organizations that,
There might be, but it, you know, if this isn't an accommodation, it's a risk. If you don't, you gotta pay for them at some point if you don't get that grant, you know?
no, I know, clearly we're gonna make the investment, but if we could access grant money to help
Oh.
offset the cost,
Always, we would want to pursue
then,
that.
but are we pursuing it? We
Yeah.
want to,
Yeah.
are we?
Yeah, and then sometimes we're running the problems, like give you an example of what's the growing thing? Flex Farm, we applied for a grant for that through the state, we were hoping to get it, we didn't get it, right? You know, we just learned that last Friday, right? So we'll continue to apply for any grant that we can, but if we aren't gonna get them, we still wanna try and get these things taken care of, which is why we're leaving them in the budget.
So out of the 3 buildings, what are we looking at as far as coverage percent? I mean, are we at like 20% of classrooms covered? Like what does
GMS is
this
universal
next
coverage.
6 get? What's that?
Universal,
GMS is 100%.
every general
You
education.
have it, okay.
Yeah, that's why, and it's because, that's why,
Yeah, we're coming up with the grant.
All right,
So-
That's why it's not just a problem.
With 6 additional ones, how
Yep.
close do you get?
So that, what that would cover for us, with this year, we purchased 6, which covered our 4 5th grade classrooms, plus 2 additional, unified arts classrooms that child is traveling to. So what we would do next year is it would cover our 4 6th grade classrooms and additionally 2 additional unified arts classes, with the anticipation of the following year, the same thing, so that by the end of the 4-year cycle, which is why it says year 2 of 4,
Fully.
Gotcha.
everybody will
Then
be
you'll
fully
be-
outfitted, we'll need no further.
And what
You'll
about
probably come into high school next.
Yeah, and at the high school, because they don't travel in grade levels, it's just different courses, so we tend to move them more
Okay.
to be in a class where a student goes, so we get the list at the beginning of the year, we try to outfit it that way. So ours is mostly just for maintenance and repair, our lines.
Gotcha.
So then the next question comes, now we cycle through, we've got all 4 grades, now when we start replacing them?
Wow.
50 years.
Hopefully a while.
I think you said that they last quite a while.
They last a while.
Have you had your,
I was at both 7 years, we never had to replace one we had bought in that time. Now, we had to do small repairs, I don't want to
Yeah,
say that they all
yeah.
work
Yeah.
perfectly. But once you get them in, as long as, and you're handling them correctly, which should be exclusively the adult in the classroom.
Well, if it's, yeah, I mean, if it's there, if you don't have to move them, there shouldn't be much.
Yeah,
handling.
that's what you're trying to like, do,
Yep.
is to minimize.
Well,
as long as
so we
Just
have
needs to
found-
be that- oh, sorry, go ahead.
So what we found is most of the repairs, because like all electrical components, you're talking about charging and charging ports. You're talking about rechargeable batteries. Oftentimes the batteries die, and then just like the ports become loose and they become unchargeable. And for the most part, the company has been good enough to work with where there are ways that we don't have to pay total replacement charge. You know, so
the
if
kid
it,
plugs into this?
Hmm?
So a kid plugs into one?
no, so the teacher wears a necklace device that looks like almost like a
kinda like
hanging
the-
around it. And, but at night you have to plug that in just like you plug in your phone.
I was just thinking, like, when
And
we
there's
were
a
at
tower.
high school, the kid is more capable of handling it, you see less, damaged equipment, but if it's a teacher, well then, I guess.
any other questions for LMS, Ms. Grantham this evening?
Yep. So, on GMS, you had a section that disappeared. LMS, we have a section that appeared.
Magical.
Yeah.
Came from GMS.
Is this the new one, so it's on the odd papers?
What page is this,
It
Brian?
moves up, well, electronically, it's on page 3,
Alright, so I have, it, alright. So which
What
one?
line are we looking at?
734. Additional equipment for music, for $5,000. It wasn't on the page one
Oh,
last week.
then total here is 40, what do we
The new
have?
one it is.
What's $5,000?
It's right here.
What's it for?
734, equipment additional. What I'm saying is, last week,
Oh.
it wasn't on here.
Okay,
Okay.
Now all of a sudden, it is.
That has been on there the whole time. The only thing that adjusted from that is the true cost of the pianos.
734.
There's music. There's no
We only
734.
reduced that line.
I think what Brian's saying is that
It wasn't here last week.
he was saying.
Here at all last week?
I remember seeing the piano last time.
Right, because you talked
We had a
about
big
it.
We talked about
conversation.
the
piano was there
it was on
last
page
time.
3.
That's your new one.
No, this is the old one, this is the one that's clipped in.
We talked about the model and whatever.
We talked about the model of the
Page
piano
two.
and found the cheaper version, which is how the line got
That's the new
cut
one.
by the school board
That's right.
last
That's
April.
it.
September 29th.
Oh, this is November 21st.
Discussion on it. Oh, it's different.
I remember,
Now you have an older one, that's all.
okay, I
Yeah.
remember talking about the piano,
That's-
and we
It's on
reduced
page
it
4 of
down.
the.
Twice you touched it.
Yeah.
There is no 4.
Yeah, it went down, so Brian, I'm looking at the old handout we got. It was $5,484. It went down to $4,784, which was the reduction of the,
No, the one I have, so I have an older one, that I, October 29th.
Yes, but you're right, though,
Oh, yeah, you
October
got an
29th
old
one
one.
doesn't have.
yeah, I'm
it.
looking at the November 7th one. Yes,
Right, November 7th does.
got it,
All
okay.
right, so that solves that.
Any,
Yeah, the next question is
Yep.
game officials. I know we said that there was a cost increase as far as game officials. For LMS, game officials went up about 40%. The high school is flat.
We're going in two different agencies, because we go through the tri-county officials, and they go through the NHIAA officials.
Right, and they're more expensive.
We got the quote from tri-county of what our officials were, that's where that came from our tri-county meeting with Dan.
I think, 40% is a huge increase.
Yes, it is.
And that rate
I know
is
the high
set
school- I know
by,
high school reps charge more. So, and they're flat.
who sets that rate?
Tri-county.
They do.
They do.
They
Yeah,
do.
they do, we're at their will.
Yeah, But I would double check.
We certainly don't check.
Yep.
Any additional questions for LMS this evening?
Yes, on 734, are we saying that the Yamaha CLP 835 is not in the budget or has been
It is in the
reduced?
budget, and it was reduced last night by the school board from 3,700 to 3,000.
Right, yeah, that's more in line with Musician's Friend Sweetwater at 28.99, so.
Yeah. Yeah, they took the cost of the piano down by $700.
Thank you.
Anything else for LMS this evening? All right.
I'd ask you, when did you change the name
from Raiders to Lynx, is it?
The Raiders was, I believe, if I have my historical reference correct, with the Native Americans and the
No.
Indians that were on the wall?
Not
Or
when
the
it was
and the
first
Vikings, sorry.
concepted. It was in 1974 when they first had a team. Raiders were actually Buccaneers, Pirates.
Pirates.
Lynx.
Please, they should take back those
Blue
islands.
and gold. And
Lynx
Pirates,
was-
that was big Indian.
Lynx was
on the wall.
There was a
2021.
big Indian on the wall, that I do know.
Yes.
I don't know
2021.
who- I don't know who did the mural, but it was not, it was Pirates.
Right, I mean, maybe it was supposed to be a pirate, but it was an Indian.
Well,
So it seems like it would've been cheaper to repaint the mural.
I have
Could have been
a,
Mrs. Miller.
It went to Lynx in 2021.
I have a flag on the
Could have
wall.
saved on uniforms.
I could have. I have a flag on the wall of my
That'd
office
been the same
somewhere that is
Who
the
cares?
American OG.
Alright, if nothing else on LMS this evening, we're gonna move us to
Sensitive to pirates, I get it.
CHS. Campbell.
Pirates, I like pirates.
Campbell has an increase of $50,395. Mr. Hess, if you wanna hit any high points, key drivers, don't feel like you have to walk us through all of this, but anything high level.
Transportation lines went up, NHIAA dues went up for our athletics. We have our trainer services in there that we've talked about, this idea of athletic trainer at the school. Their contract is going up. We've got a couple furniture lines in there. That's really the main drivers at the high school.
So that was gonna be my first question around the trainer service. Are we locked in to a contract that then bumped us up 11,000 in 1 year and we have no way out of it?
They're-
Do we have a chance to
Yes, they're
renegotiate before?
There's no renegotiating with that. That's what the contracted price is going to be next year. So if we want to have an athletic trainer,
But do we have the ability to not use that company and go with somebody else? Or are we completely locked in that we have?
it's either that company or we hire our own
And the board
employee.
is considering, we had a discussion last night about this, the board is considering a warrant article to bring this as a position, potentially.
Yeah.
So,
There's
and
not
the
many-
responsibility would be only for the sports teams?
Not if we were able to add it as our employee, we have the flexibility then to set their hours and their responsibilities outside of working with our athletic teams.
Because to me, if you're having an athletic trainer working with the athletes, guess who I think should pay for it?
Can you speak to the increases 2 to 3 years down the road of this contract?
The company estimates by 2030, it'll be a $60,000 contract with schools.
At that point, is it cheaper to have our own person internally?
Oh, it's almost cheaper right now to have our own personal internally. I mean, we budgeted 48.
We budgeted 48, and because of the way we're crafting the position, we wouldn't have to pay the full benefits for it, because it'll be a full-time job.
40,000?
So it would be about 48, a little over 48,000 is what would be the hypothetical warrant article if we move forward with it for the athletic trainer. The contract we have in here is 40,000. The contract gives us approximately, again, we're talking sports season, so on any given week or time of the year, it could slightly increase or decrease. Like, for example, right now, the only team playing is football, so they only need to be here for their practice and their game, right now. Not like there's all this other stuff going on. But it averages about 20 hours per week with the contract that we have right now, the services provided. The position we have, we're projecting that to be 25 or 30 hours that we would have that person. We can then utilize that person in other avenues, just like quick things, they help cover classes. We always need subs, right? Like, so that person is our employee, we can ask them to do other things. We could help them with some of the field management related to athletic training, right? We could help them with just some of the management of what's going on with athletics, those small things that we can chip away with. So we're getting a better bang for our buck. And if you look at that, you're asking that person to work on average 5 to 10 more hours a week, and then fulfilling other obligations for the school for essentially an additional $8,000. What that would look like.
That's the short-term benefit. The long-term benefit is it'd be a cost savings as well.
Yeah, and then you're that person, right? They wouldn't be in a bargaining unit or anything, so they would likely get some raises somewhere over the course of history, right? You know
Why
what I
would they
mean?
not be in the LSSA or the LEA?
Their position doesn't exist in educators right now, you know, so, I don't know how they would fit in those things. It certainly wouldn't be in the LEA.
No, but I would think that it would roll somehow into the LSSA. You're gonna
We
have
other
one.
support staff who are not, so.
Okay.
Coaches?
Yeah.
Well, again, there's a lot of people I think should be paying for this other than the taxpayers.
Now, I think when you turn contracts, there is not many people you can go get athletic training contracts with, and they're all gonna charge the same, because they know they're ain't made.
Right.
So I guess,
It's vendor or different
here's the
vendor.
question that always comes up with the warrant article. great idea.
Yeah.
I would support the warrant article, but we always have to plan for what if it fails.
Yeah, that's
So
staying in
basically,
budget.
I think what you just told me is, you're stuck with this because there's nobody else that's gonna give you a cheaper price, and there's so few competitors out there.
Right.
That's it.
And even if the trainer is the best option and they choose to move forward with the warrant article, it has to stay in the budget because you don't know whether the warrant article is gonna pass yet or not.
Correct. Now, we'd be willing to make the commitment to not spend $27 million budget. I know it's not like a ton of money, but if that warrant article would pass, we would commit to not spending that $40,000 unless there was some sort of dire emergency, obviously, that we'd have to
That's
figure that.
very, very fair. Okay.
Other questions for CHS this evening?
Do you have one other one? Everybody should just write it down, because I ask for this every year. Is there any way that I?
Is this
can get-
physics books? Is
No,
that-
no, I'm not gonna get blasted by Brian for not offering physics. Page 24, under vocational transport, is there any way that we could get a breakdown of that 69,696 by how much of that goes to Pinkerton versus how much goes to Alvin?
Well, right now, we don't have any transportation to Pinkerton.
Oh, that's gone
Any
now?
student that goes to Pinkerton has to
This is all
self-transport.
out.
So this is all for Albert.
Perfect, thank you.
Good breakdown.
Glad I could help. Thank you, Scott, I appreciate that. Thank you very much, everybody.
I think you answered that question. You sat there and the audio was terrible.
We still, yeah, like Jake said, we still do have students who go to Pinkerton, but they are self-transported.
Okay,
Just to clarify that.
What are the requirements to be a trainer? Do you have to have like?
They have a
some sort of
certification program.
Are you interested?
I was gonna say, part-time gig?
I don't think Derek wants to go back to school for 8 years to get a certificate to become a trainer.
Part-time,
Other questions for CHS this evening?
but it's a goal.
So I don't know where I saw it, but somewhere there were like lab chairs or something in here.
That is
Was
not
what
in
it was?
CHS.
Yep, all right, so yes, okay, well, then we already had that conversation.
Well, I can explain why they are the cost they are.
Okay,
So we had looked at several versions, and the version that we had that I brought the pictures of last year, that I can bring the other 10 and show you the pictures of where the sides are chipped off and they fall off. The stools that we're purchasing now through a company called Verco is a highly recommended school furniture supplier. We purchased the first 10 stools from them last year. They're super sturdy. They've been knocked over. They don't crack. They don't break. They don't dent and twist and turn. And as Jake said earlier, I'm right now suffering from the cheap tables that were purchased. I think it was 5 years ago or 6 years ago. They got a whole bunch that they were like, oh, this is great. We're going for the Kia version, the cheaper for the taxpayers. And kids are not playing WWE, but it looks like they played WWE. They sat on a table and it went kaboom and crashed into 2 pieces because it's particle board that doesn't hold up. So we're looking to, when we're spending taxpayer money, we want to do it in a way that's going to last the taxpayers. I'm not going to be coming back to you in 3 years and go, oh, that table that I promised was going to be sturdy. Oops, there it is in 2 pieces.
Famous last words.
I'll try.
You just jinxed it.
well, we'll see how it goes, like I said, having my own lab space and
Knock on
knowing
wood,
what
go
my
wood.
tables,
That's right.
my chairs cost, I struggled to see, what was it, $75 for a lab stool, when I know mine are pretty good and a lot less. So hopefully, we're not coming back to them, but I would also encourage us to make sure that,
If you have a company that you know of that supplies the cheaper stool, I will happily look
I
at
mean,
it.
they're metal, they're great, they aren't that bad, because you obviously don't want cushions on them, so.
No.
Yep, no, absolutely not, but, so, again, I think there were, 16, 24 of them, so we can take a look at it. I don't wanna mess up your replacement schedule, but I also wanna make sure we're using, we're
No,
not.
I'm game to look at what, if you
Perfect.
have something, send it my way, I'll happily look at it.
Any other questions for CHS this evening?
Not yet.
Can I comment a little bit on furniture, because I think it's a good thing, just from
Sure.
a business standpoint. And I respect looking for lowest prices, but also look for relationships. Like Verco is one of the, like, probably the leading, educational furniture company, that is, as you said, the 2 previous schools I have. When you develop relationships with these people, these vendors, they give you better deals over time. Like we have a long-standing relationship at Bo with Verco. Our prices were always lower than what the listed prices were because they could count on us.
They just gave the high school a deal this year when we bought some furniture. We met them at the principals conference in June. I haven't.
Well, it's good to hear, because a lot of times when you have a long-term relationship, they're like, oh, they're not going anywhere.
No.
We're gonna jack the price.
And I will also say this, they're finding other ways to cut, like, so for instance, this is, a new thing that has appeared in the last 6 months. It keeps showing up on invoices called tailgate delivery, which basically is if, we'll load it to the tailgate, and if you can get it off, we're not gonna charge you $900.
Oh, nice.
But if you want our guys to take it that extra foot, it's $900, and we're like, I'll rally some troops.
Is that what happened with the Scholastic book delivery the other day?
No, the Scholastic book delivery showed up at 7:45, and I said, how quick? And he said, 6 minutes. I said, all right.
Oh, jeez.
It's about 10 or 15.
He did it 9, he did it in 9, but yeah.
Any other questions for CHS this evening?
Just more around the furniture side of things, and I would just recommend take it or leave it. Same thing as what we say as far as the town is concerned. It's not fair for the three of them to have to sit there and try to make sure that they don't hit some red line that all of a sudden like, oh, wait a minute, why is Dan's up by $20,000? That's outrageous. If there could be a district-wide plan of the three of them together and going, roll out your worst stuff. And then start to come up with a plan of, okay, you know what? Yeah, this year, Dan needs more because the three of you in the district agree that, you know what, his stuff is the worst. And then that way we can just kind of chip away instead of, all right, well, I don't want to make it look like my budget goes up too much, so I guess I'll just deal with something that's horrible. I think I heard you in the session that you said that basically you had a leg of a chair that's going like at a 90-degree angle. Like,
I agree with you. Like, one of the, just not with furniture, with like everything. I'm a system, I like my systems. I was a math teacher, I like order and structure. Like, I would like to see us develop like systematic things. So like, again, previous district I was at, talked about the high school because that's what I was in charge of. There was a furniture plan for 15 years outlined, right? And it was just like, this is what it's gonna be the next year with the increase of, you know, inflation or whatever, right? And we mapped it out, and it was just an automatic, right? What is it this year? We're on year 2, this is what it is, all right? We added an extra, what, 3%, because that's what it went up, right? Year 3, did you do year 2? Yep, so now we're on the year 3, this is what we're gonna order, same thing, hasn't changed, right? That's what I wanna get the entire district in a lot of different avenues. We talk about uniforms, we talk about furniture, we talk about curricular cycles, right? You know, and curricular reviews and stuff like that. Let's get systems so these conversations become really easy. This is what you said. And then we're just talking about the unexpected, and then we have conversation about the unexpected. But if you know the expected, that speeds a lot of this up. I get it.
and then Dan doesn't need to bring his moldiest rug. Been out here for 20 years, slap it down in the middle of the table for everybody to go, all right, yeah, go ahead, give them the money.
Their little kids' mold is the least of the problems when it comes to the rugs.
I have some pictures on my phone somewhere in the moldy textbooks, I can show them if anybody needs to see them.
All right, if nothing else for CHS this evening, I'm gonna move us to.
I have one more.
Yep, go ahead.
Does the AD still teach classes too?
No, no, no.
When did that stop happening?
This year's the first year.
This is the first year?
Yeah.
Oh. Was there a reason for that?
When we added the middle school section into the job description, we removed the, it was never in the contract or anything, it was a past practice.
I thought for some reason Dan handled the middle school, he doesn't.
He's the middle school representative, but now the high school AD helps out and oversees, yeah.
So when their say was a uniform issue at the middle school, the person who swooped in the, solved the said issue was the AD. So, along with Jen, you have to allow, obviously, but teamwork.
That poor girl, she was trying so hard to do something nice.
She
She got all kinds of
I
flack.
felt terrible.
I know.
Yep.
We talked to her today, we're in a good place. She, you know, it's all came from
She's a good kid.
Yeah, all came from a good place.
All right. Last call, CHS. All right, moving to HR. I don't believe we have an updated packet for HR, so you can reference your legacy binder or the digital version of that. The HR budget has and Ms. Foslin's not here, it has an increase of $1,151 from last year.
Is there a digital version of this one?
There's no updated version.
Oh, it's only one page in there.
Yeah, it is
This
literally
doesn't
a
include
page.
like personal.
No. Any questions for HR? Seeing none.
No.
Yep, go ahead.
Here, so I guess,
Yeah,
you
you
know,
can try.
the one thing that went up the most is staff wellness, you can see that there's a take rate by the staff that is increasing year over year to keep up with the increased spend.
What line are you at?
Miscellaneous, staff wellness, at the bottom of the page.
I can answer, I don't know about my head.
All right, next, food service. Before we jump into questions, I know there was some conversations and discussions last night at the school board meeting around food service that clarified some things from the last time that we were all in this room together. Before we jump into questions, Mr. O'Connell, Mr. Cutter, anyone want to
Yeah, so.
high-level updates on food service before we jump into questions?
Yeah, so the food service numbers are not in your materials tonight. The board did talk about this with the superintendent and business administrator last night. In the budget and how we accounted for it last year is exactly how we intend to account for it this year. In the revenue numbers, once we get to that part of the budget cycle, there will be an offset to account for the deficit of food service. The board intends to add a negative number to revenue of $100,000 to account for that deficit.
So the tax increase will not be 1.6 million, it'll be 1.7 million?
It will go up because of the deficit food service.
So we'll report less revenue, the same thing that we're doing this current year.
And it's,
To do that.
how much are we doing? Cause like the number last time we met was over, what was
It's not that, we clarified
Yeah,
that, I won't.
that was clarified
We
last
clarified
night.
last night at the board, I know.
So it's not
I know. It's not
388,000? Okay.
We went in there and it looked more closely, projected some stuff out a little bit. but,
Did I, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to misspeak, but did I, it's $100,000 is the number you're anticipating?
$100,000.
Okay.
And last year was the deficit 150?
No, it was 130.
10.
130.
Yeah.
You had said that our prices are probably on the higher side compared to
We
other
are the
districts.
highest.
The highest.
Are we also, like, do other towns lose money as well?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Where do we
Most-
stack in that range? Are we
On the lower end.
on the lower
You
end?
know, and I think it's dependent on the size of your district,
Yeah,
right?
right.
It's proportionally probably the same as a lot of other school districts, you know?
One interesting takeaway I had from hearing you talk about this last night was the concept of kids taking certain items
Yes.
that attributes to money that we get back from the federal
Yes.
government.
Yes.
Whether they
Fruits
eat
and
it or
veggies.
not, the encouragement of kids to take that food
Yes.
helps contribute to revenue that we get back as a school district.
We cannot push that enough, so when like, and people, like, I'm not trying to be flippant when I say this, when the food service workers say, take this orange or take this fruit or vegetable, and kids are like, no, and they keep pushing them on it, they're not trying to be difficult, it literally helps us with our revenue, because they're taking a full meal, and when we track all of the food that's coming in and out of the kitchen, that's reflected in that way, so we get better fees. And so, you know, for example, like, if a kid, if it's pizza day, right, and they just take the slice of pizza and the milk, but then don't take the accompanying salad, right, we can't charge that as a reimbursable meal. So even if they're gonna, and I know this sounds so insane, like I know it, and like I see it firsthand all the time, they take the salad and immediately throw it in the trash, it's still beneficial to us from the school district standpoint.
Not that we're
Send it
encouraging
back.
that,
Yes, eat your salad, but like, yeah, like, and like, you joke a little, but talk with your friends, like, you know what I mean? If you have like a friend who's like, I'll eat your salad, like, yeah, give your, once it leaves the kitchen area, you can share your food with whoever you want, like, it's not.
That happens in middle school all the time, I can tell you that right now.
Is there a way of knowing like how many we're missing out on and then just like send a gentle reminder to said parents saying,
Yeah,
hey?
we're not missing on it, like, a ton, right? But like, every little bit helps, right?
No, I know, so,
Every
like,
little bit.
Some parents will be like, oh, you don't wanna waste it, so don't take it, but if we sent a gentle nudge that, hey, by taking that and giving it to your rabbit later, we then save money, like.
I think that was the first time I had heard it explained that way last night. That's why I reiterated it tonight. And I think to Douglas's point, like gentle nudges and newsletters that go out may not be a bad idea.
Yeah, and you know, that not everything's gonna fall in that, right? Like, we're talking high school, for example, bigger kids, use pizza day as an example. Some kids will buy the second slice of pizza, they'll take their salad, they'll take their juice. They're a bigger kid, they want more food. Like, we're not gonna chase that kid down and take 2 whole meals, because that is an additional burden on the kid paying the lunch, right? Because it is cheaper if they bought the original meal to buy the second slice, right? It's that initial meal we need encompassed, you know what I mean? That's the big thing to get.
Other questions or comments on food service this evening?
We have to clarify one this is literally $1, but I wrote the note to Julie here when I was here in the town, where when we do the transfer in to do the cover of the deficit, we have to use a transfer line. So we're gonna clarify, but we think we have to add $1, because we're gonna use that line as the transfer line. And if that's the
It's
line-
currently zeroed out?
Currently zeroed. So if you see a $1 increase, that's what it's for.
Other questions on food service this evening?
I'm still questioning the increase in food for GMS, where the other two schools are flat.
Say that again, sir.
I'd asked the question when Lauren was here, that the cost of food for GMS is up $10,000.
Didn't we just see that there's an expectation of reduced enrollment at TMS? So why would we, it's a good question. Why
Well,
would we need
and right
more
now,
food?
CHS and LMS are flat.
I mean, I think she was basing that number on what her actuals were from the 2024 school year. So
that-
she sold 65,000.
Right.
Do we see more elementary kids eat school lunch compared to middle school and high school kids? Or,
I can get more clarity on that. I don't know 100%. I have the overall.
Are they not
breakdown,
taking the
yes.
orange?
No, actually, I was gonna say one thing, and this would be speculating, when we talk about the value meal isn't an issue at GMS because,
You don't give them a choice? Here you go.
yeah, I hate to say it, but it's like prison, the tray comes, and you take it, like, it's just like, the tray is slid in, like the value meal is kind of pre-prepped, and then they go to, so, I don't know if it's all eaten, but it's all taken.
does that answer your question, Brian, or do you?
No.
No. So, I heard you say you'd get some additional
I
information.
can get some additional
from Lauren.
information. Maybe the sales would be more helpful. I have the overall sale numbers in front of, like, the entire district. I don't have.
It's just the other two schools are flat, and I don't understand why.
Yeah, so I think if you look at that, I'm speculating on Lauren's behalf right now. If you look at the FY '24 actuals, it was about 65,000, a little bit over that. Anticipating food gets more expensive, I think that's why she went up to 70,000 there. And I think she's just trying to reflect that. Back in 2022, it was 68,000, '23 it was 59,000, so I think she's trying to figure out the right amount there, where maybe she's a little bit more confident at the other schools on their food expenses there.
So follow up with the spend and then the breakdown for each building.
Right, and also what I asked her, that if she's gonna follow that line of logic, then why at LMS would it not be 24's number, which is 66,000 rather than 75,000?
Yeah, I remember you asking that.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else for food service this evening? All right, buildings and grounds, which is, you should have one, it's a new packet that starts with custodial services at the top. This one has an increase of $19,875. Questions on buildings and grounds?
Not a question, just a comment. Nice work as far as academic design and school do is something vastly.
Yeah, it didn't take long.
It's just nice to see, like, that tells me that, you know what, there's real, roll up your sleeves, due diligence, and asking the question, like, do we really need this?
Yeah. This is the
Yeah,
hardest,
people hate it.
yeah, this is probably the hardest section for me and Julie. Dave obviously contributes a lot to this to work through because we're so new to the district, right? So, as we go through and trying to estimate some, obviously vaguer guesses at what things are gonna cost. I mean, there's one thing with utilities, you can get quotes and prices and stuff like that. But repairs, the certain general repairs, you always gotta expect the unexpected. We don't have a history yet of knowing, okay, this is where this is gonna feel. So there's a lot of, trying to figure out using past numbers, talking to everyone at the buildings, listening to the board and stuff like that. But this is why there's been the most fluctuation, I think, in this packet, as we've gone through this process, because every day we're getting more and more information and trying to make it smoother.
I would ask what's driving the increase on page 1 for custodial supplies at GMS. It's a lump sum number, but looking at line 610, 29,930, almost $30,000. The previous years are lower than that. It was fixed change last night? Well,
Yeah, right on the next page, you have the reduction.
No, the GMS.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What is?
GMS line
We
6.
reduced LMS.
You reduced LMS to bring it in line. GMS is just a lump sum number with no indication as to why it is. But if I look at the other schools, they're more flatlined. So what's driving the increase in GMS?
Because that building scares us. And I just, with an aging building like that,
But would it be custodial? That'd be more maintenance at that point. It's not custodial
Well,
supplies.
maintenance is up to, I just think we're looking at that. And again, this is one of the hardest ones for us to do is the guess, because we haven't gone through the whole year.
All right, so I'll circle it, because I'm coming back to it.
Clean up like food.
Any other additional questions for buildings and grounds this evening?
It's the sawdust.
We
need more sawdust.
Question to Mr.
More
Leary
sawdust.
before I say something.
Yep.
Mr. Leary,
What?
as far as the Hennechuck information, has that been settled as far as potential rate changes, adjustments, things of that nature from the town level? Or is that still up in the air?
I got an email this afternoon late, I haven't read it yet,
Okay.
but it refers to Pennachuck.
Okay.
I can read it and get back to you.
Yeah.
I guess, where are you getting your water rates from? Because there's
The town.
obviously a potential rate change
Correct.
from the town.
We've been contacting with Kim.
Perfect.
No, we're not, I think she has information faster than we do,
That's fine.
so,
I just wanted to make sure you were getting it from the.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
great.
And those utilities, we've gotten a little different information at each kind of step of the way, so they fluctuated a little bit here. We got an updated fuel oil, I said the wrong one yesterday.
Yes.
Fuel oil, so that got adjusted. Our electrical, we got locked in through 26 at the same rate as right now. So we've been trying to chip away at those things. We're in conversations with Viking, who does the HVAC, leaving utilities for a second, to possibly look at, again, just like school duty, is there something we can do internally that helps with this? So as the year goes on, we can start one at a time, kind of chipping off at these things, we're going to continue to do that. We gotta produce a budget right now,
Sure.
so we do the best we can now, but continue to look at that stuff.
On page 4, what drove the increase from 58,000 to 94,000 on oil between 23 and 24? I mean, I understand your budgeting based on the recent years, but why was there such a substantial increase in our oil demand in that year? It went from,
23 to 24.
yeah, it went from actuals 58.4 to 93, almost 5. In 1 year, we almost, what,
But
Page 4.
yes.
Yeah, the bottom.
Dave can, I believe that was 1 year where we were able to take advantage of year before tank fill up. Like we did like a June 1st fill up on the last one, and so we were able to, so it wasn't like a,
Because 22 was 65,000. So it's just, there's been a substantial increase in 24.
Heavily.
I can check with Dave.
Yeah, so that was actually gonna be my follow-up.
Yeah.
Why the fuel oil didn't go down if LMS is no longer using oil?
Well, this is GMS right now, I
It's just
haven't
GMS,
gotten there.
yes.
yet.
Oh, it's broken down by
Yeah.
building? Okay.
yeah.
Oh, I was gonna look for oil to see if we had oil for next year, because I'm still salty about the whole freaking project.
There's no oil for LMS.
Oh, perfect, I was looking, I'd gotten to page 4.
Gary, thanks for drawing it to my attention. We can certainly get an answer to
That-
that.
I just-
That is a big increase, but now I'm curious about it.
Hey, did we change how we use it? Like, what happened?
There's no change, but
And can we undo it?
we have in the past utilized, we've taken advantage of, like that end of season.
Sure,
like, fill
but
up.
we had 65,000 the year before, almost 60,000, 93.
So were you filling it up once a year and now you're filling it up twice a year?
I can't tell you exactly how many times, we fill it up more than once a year because the truck always comes at dismissal.
It's like 2 to, yeah, so, are you
It's
filling,
a tanker at 245.
are you filling up more frequently now than you were previously? I
Dave would be
guess.
able to answer that. I mean, I don't think our usage has necessarily,
I mean, I'll go back to the
Increase.
past reports and figure that one out, but it just seems like that's a sizable jump. So whatever we did between there and that, we should undo. Like,
I believe also, again, I don't think it accounts for anything. I believe we were actually able to reutilize the leftover oil at the middle school down to GMS.
Yeah, not all
I
of
think
it, but.
we stored and pumped back in.
That did
down the hill.
happen when, you think that's what,
That would be last year, so that'd be the 23-24 school year.
Yeah.
I don't know which financial year, what FY that fall into.
Cause our,
Yeah.
dug out last summer.
All right, so that could take you from 65 to 58.
Yeah, again, I said I
But
don't
how
think
do
it
we get
accounts
to
for
90?
everything.
How do we get to 90?
Yeah, it's a good question. We'll find out.
Other questions on buildings and grounds this evening? Seeing none, we'll move
So,
to,
boiler maintenance repair is like increased due to aging units. Do we actually have somebody we're talking to? Do we have repairs on the docket, or is this just that we're throwing something at the wall and hoping it sticks?
what page you
Well,
on?
it's actually, most of the boilers have a similar note.
What page?
Increase due to age. Oh, yeah, I get that, but is there a justification? Well, that's page 4. I think this one is page 6 too. So.
You're looking at
I
Campbell?
think each one of them has it. CHS has it, or it was LMS.
Yeah, I think like with CHS, for example, we're just getting closer to the end of the age of that boiler. You know, the building's been open 25 years, 30 years is about the estimate for a boiler. It's gonna start acting up. We could potentially see it acting up more and more as we approach that 30 age kind of ending right there. So I think that's just to put that in place in the event some of that acting up happens. Yep.
As I said last night in the school board meeting, nothing would make me happier than we over budget and underspend this line, because it means my life is one less stressor.
Well, back to the whole plan that we were talking about, right? We've known for a while that our boilers are coming to end of age, and yet nobody's really had a plan for what we're gonna do there.
You hold that thought.
So I like where you're going. I've been pushing for this district-wide CIP for 14 years. So the fact that we actually have a superintendent who's engaged in trying to do that, awesome.
Yeah, so, you know, summarize all this area, I'm sure people are aware. We had the capital needs assessment people come in for all 3 schools to help us outline 20-year plan for these type of capital needs. And like, how would that look? Talking to each other, like the 3 schools talking to each other, what are more immediate needs versus what it is, time that out over 20 years and help to put that in place. Like with the boilers, I would expect, again, I'm not a specialist in the area, but just working in schools, boilers 30 years, you're gonna see a capital improvement plan for about 5 years from now, boilers for CHS, right? Like those type of things as kind of going. And then I would imagine, you know, we'll have discussions obviously at the board level, continue to look at our trust funds to put some of that money aside for those things. We know what's coming up in future years, then we utilize the trust funds to pay for some of these repairs.
No, because so you can level fund the tax impact, which is what we've been hoping to do for a while.
That onsite insight, you know, I said this at the board meeting last night, I have a call with the assessor, you know, Monday, and to go over drafts of stuff, you know, I don't have drafts per se. Yet, but she's like, hey, I'm getting ready to be done, you're available Monday to talk, got some final questions for you before I send everything your way. Sounds good, let's chat, so we're on schedule for that, hopefully have those.
So I guess then the question just becomes, is this the appropriate way of budgeting it? If they're the ifs and ands and we're not sure, should it be in the budget this way as a budgeted expense? Or should it be, if it ands maybes actually come to fruition, then we use the trust fund?
Yeah, I think we're hedging our bets a little bit on both ways right now while we get some of this stuff set up, you know. Like we know, like, you know, the parking lot was a good example, we ended up taking that out, but like we're hedging our bets. We had hedged it and put it in the budget, prompting some discussion about it, took it out now at this point. Some of these other are hedges as we establish kind of these procedures kind of moving forward.
Anything else for buildings and grounds this evening? All right, moving to business. Yeah, I don't believe you have an updated packet for this one. You can refer to your digital or your old binder version. Business budget looks like it has a decrease of $8,103. Any questions for business office, finance office? Going once, going twice. Seeing none, we'll move to the SAU. The SAU has a decrease of $244. Any questions on the SAU budget? Okay, seeing none, we will move to curriculum. Just a second to find it. Thank you. Curriculum has a decrease of 18,841. No, sorry, that's incorrect. Oh, is that correct? $18,841 decrease. questions for curriculum or any
I have a
comments?
question on line 641, textbooks. So, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought that under the previous leader that we had like a 5-year kind of level plan. Should I be concerned that now all of a sudden it drops down to 32 for 1 year and then it's gonna spike back up into that $90,000 to $100,000 range? Like, how is that contract set up as far as the overall?
So, like Brian said earlier, we are really looking at systems and putting solid things into place, and curriculum review is part of that. And part of the curriculum review committee's task is we just finished course proposal review, so now we're working on curriculum review, starting at our next meeting. And it came to my attention when I came here that it was actually a couple months ago, there were moldy social studies textbooks in the middle school classroom. And obviously we cannot have students using moldy textbooks. And then after some further research into that, science and social studies curriculum has not been updated they have textbooks that are like 20 years old. So the science textbooks, for example, talk about a launch that happened way back in the 19 whatever, and it's so irrelevant to our current instruction that it renders it like unusable. And then what resources do they fall on to help get the students the current relevant information, right? So with that, all of those things, the way that I do curriculum implementation is not let's get this thing and implement it here, teachers, here we go. Because a lot of times that comes with lack of professional development, lack of understanding of what this thing is. Sometimes you get it in, you spend all this money on it, and it's not actually what you need. The company did a really good job at a dog and pony show and saying, "Woo, look, this shiny thing looks great." So I am a firm believer in pilots and looking at what's available with the stakeholders that are going to be using it and having them use it with students and see, how does this work? Does it work? What are the pitfalls? Because we know that not all programs are magic bullet that are going to be great. So that is what my plan is for next year, is let's look at some science and social studies options, and you'll see it in 2 lines, the textbook and the software. And I referenced it in last week's meetings. The reason for that is because a lot of companies are moving more towards digital platforms, but we also had a conversation of the importance of a hybrid. Like, in front of us, we are using paper and computers, so we need to show students how to do that. So we want to make sure whatever it is that we're going to lean towards has those robust options. And if we come to a decision and an adoption, will it come with a higher price tag? It could, right? But
So you're taking a more conservative approach, which is
Yes.
great to make sure that you
Yes.
want the investment, the small investment should be a larger investment, but I guess my original question is, okay, so with that conservative rollout, it is going to introduce
You'll see a
potential
spike.
volatility in future years where all of a sudden, like, let's say your social studies and science programs, those pilot programs hit, then we're gonna all of a sudden go from 30 to 100.
And those programs technically, they're not, so social studies and science, they're not usually as big ticket as the literacy and math, because there's a lot of consumables that come with those other ones. So there's a lot of different things to look at. Are we gonna see a spike up? Most likely, but I just wanted to give you some of that background so that you know that there's now a fiscally responsible way to doing this, because I have seen in so many things that we had resources and I'm like, what is this? Who uses it? Like, I'm like, Jen, what's Gizmos? Is anybody using this? They want $3,000 back from, and nobody has been using it, but we've been paying for it.
Okay.
Like, but why? You know, so I wanna make sure that whatever we are purchasing and whatever, just so that you know, when you see lines in the curriculum budget, they've been vetted with teachers and with students, and they're going to be used
Yeah.
from there forward.
Perfect. I'll take volatility for adoption.
Okay,
Good
I think
question.
one other note on the curricular thing, that ties to this, I just wanna point out, the software line did go up significantly here, and that's because we brought over a lot from individual schools right into the singular umbrella, so we can just condense what we're buying. Like Corey shows up, you know, it used to show up in the schools, now it's here. History writing used to be in shows, now schools, now it's here, and stuff like that, so.
yeah. And I also wanted to mention too, there are major updates in the Ed 306 laws, which are the minimum standards for public education, in the realm of social studies and civics. And in order to make sure that we are adhering to those new laws, we need to make sure we have the resources to do that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for curriculum this evening? Okay. We'll move to technology. Technology has a decrease of $92,096.
Well, it's 'cause a lot of it moved, right, or no?
Can you move to the next?
Some of it, yes, sorry.
Can you move to the next slide, please? Yeah, thank you.
Some of it did move.
Yeah,
There's
software.
also a big reduction, gotta refresh my memory 1 second. Something we bought,
Was it the Aruba, isn't it?
it's in the repairs and
Yeah.
maintenance on page 2 in the bottom. So you'll see a significant decrease in that particular line, because last year there was a purchase of a 3-year contract essentially bought, and it paid all up front. So you won't see that in there this year, you won't see that in there next year. 3 years down the road, you'll see, if we're happy, obviously, and renegotiate that contract, that will come back into that. So that was $38,000, I think it was?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like we said, we moved some of that over to Dr. Taylor's area, some of the school stuff.
So I guess on 650 software on page 3, that increase of 47,775, is that based on the consolidation of, okay, so that's the,
Yeah.
Yep.
for all intents and purposes, that's the purpose of that.
Yep, so we did like kind of curricular consolidation of the curricular window, kind of more operational consolidation to Chris's stuff over here.
I just wanted to make sure that all the power school did
Fair question.
Additional questions on technology this evening?
Were all those test messages this morning from Power School supposed to go to the test server?
That's fun.
We got like 12 of those. Any additional questions for technology? Okay. Special services. Special services currently has wait a minute, make sure I'm looking at the right one, sorry. Wait, did I skip one?
School board.
I did skip school board, yeah, apologies, let's do school board first, sorry.
We did talk about it. You did put to it at some point.
I don't think, I did SAU, but I don't think I did,
sorry.
yeah, I skipped school board, it wasn't on my list here, I didn't write it. So, let's do school board first. School board was in your updated packet, it was, two pieces of paper, it has an increase of $2,995. Questions or comments on school board?
So I guess it seems like most of it is around election services.
And the audit costs, it's just going on consistently.
But for the election, doesn't the town, I mean, you got one election. The town covers the voting machines and things like that, so even though it's housed at CHS, it's still,
It's Mr. Taylor, if you look at the notes under that section, there's an asterisk that says fees have been historically paid but not reflected in any budget line. So I assume that means it's just been paid and not budgeted in the past. The school has doled out $1,300 and not budgeted it.
They pay for their own ballots, their information they send out, the mailers and all that stuff.
Yeah, but do they pay the moderator?
He's also the moderator for the school.
For delivery.
But these weren't showing up in town clerk.
No, because it's separate.
So-
School's their own entity.
Right, but, okay, so
You're talking about these dollars and cents don't show up in the town budget.
The school wasn't budgeting this $1,300. The town was receiving $1,300,
Just coming from underspend.
right?
Well, would they have been, they've been paying for their own
They're paying
clerks?
Somebody, right? Ballot clerks, doesn't the town clerk have to be the one that pays the ballot clerks? They're the ones that are on the
I
town
believe-
payroll.
I could check on it, but I believe the school pays their own, their
Yeah,
portion of the
but
ballot.
I was
definitely
given,
been paying it.
I had,
Yeah.
yeah, I had a list of some items when I was building the budget that was left for me from the former BA. Had some items that should be added into the budget because they weren't accurately reflected, so I added those.
So it sounds like clarification from the town side to make sure that these costs should be associated with the school.
I guess the question then would be like, why is 2022, is it $300? And then we started paying election clerk services apparently?
That was
And
the
23, it's actual
You
originally.
can see the actual spends, but the budget last year, the budget the last 2 years was zero.
Yeah, but the budget was the actual.
Right.
The actual was.
The 2022 was 287,
Oh, why the $1,000?
1238, 1296.
The other-
Were we not originally paying for an election clerk? And if not, why do we need one now?
Maybe that,
That's a
is that a
question.
question for Terry? I don't,
Yeah.
it might be the best place to direct that to Terry, perhaps?
That's gonna, God.
To Kim?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can call Cam then, to clarify.
Thanks.
That increase looks like it's associated with that.
Yeah, it looks like it's associated with, how did we get away with not paying it? Do we now need to pay it, or is it what is it water? Like, I don't know.
Any other questions on school board this evening?
I think there's a lot of new things that are coming to light now with the new administration.
Yeah, so it's amazing what happens when we shine a light in the dark.
I think back in the day, Michelle used to do that work, to be honest.
That could be,
I think Michelle used to do it.
that could be.
It was probably
We had a
stipend or
separate
something. so-
moderator and we had clerk services that we were obligated to pay. I truly just don't think it was a budgeted item.
But what he just said
But
makes
then it
sense,
I
because
think
that's
Michelle
when
used to
she
do it.
left, and if that corresponds with when, then the cost went up $1,000, that could potentially be it.
Do have one question on the audit services, so, just correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't we have had higher audit services the year of the dispute around the LOS project funding that would have increased that audit service? I would have expected that, 23, 24 would have been, increased by $3,000-4,000 over 2022 based on there must have been additional auditing at the time.
So
And
that
why would
was-
we still be at that stage if we know?
We went out to bid on that and we didn't receive any bids
Yep.
for additional audit work. So
Okay.
we didn't actually, we didn't perform any additional audits because.
So the
we-
project wasn't audited? Is that what is that what you're saying, that the LMS project wasn't audited?
The request of the board at the time, right, was to have additional, we put out a proposal for audit services to audit the deficit work.
And that never got,
Not the LMS, the deficit, well.
The
yeah.
actual deficit work during the period, which is I
Yep.
think where your question is.
But
There were
nobody-
there were no bids to that RFP, therefore that work was never performed.
oh, good God.
So, there you go.
Any other questions on?
It just gets better.
School board this evening?
No.
Alright.
No, because I had questions I didn't know I had.
Moving to special services.
You are.
Special services has an increase of $242,874. This one is in your original binder or the digital version. Questions, comments on special services? can see up on the screen there some of the notable decreases as well as increases. I think Superintendent addressed some of those earlier with the drivers, key drivers to the budget. Questions, comments, discussion on special services this evening?
The hardest one.
So, yeah, so, agree completely, so,
Yeah.
out of district,
Yep.
185, 806. Did that particular student move in during
First
this
week of
particular?
First week of school.
This school?
year.
First week of school.
Okay. Was the special ed fund tapped
We might.
to cover that? You might.
don't.
Okay, so you're still
Yeah,
potentially.
we're only gonna tap it if
Okay.
we need to. So as we do, we have a budget amount, we obviously haven't crossed that threshold. There is a chance we might have to tap it this year. But if we.
Because that was the whole idea behind it, is that unexpected move-in, I didn't budget for it.
And that's-
I would have expected break glass, give me the 185.
And that's just
Well,
the
you do everything
tuition,
you
right?
can before you break glass. So like, as we looked at different things, Sarah's done some magic of doing it. We've had slight adjustments here and there, a slight decrease in transportation over here, something over there, right, related to all this line. That allows us not yet to have to break that glass, but we're not out of the woods, so.
Can I expect to see a warrant article that funds that program again? Because I know we haven't seen it the last few years.
Yes.
Okay.
The board talked about that last night, kind of that whole process and trying to get that to be more robust for those unknowns.
Good luck. So, the other thing, so is that just the tuition, or does that include the
Transportation.
transportation?
Transportation separate.
Yeah,
So-
that's just tuition.
Oh, good.
Yep. Yep. Now, what we budgeted for is all of our current students. There's no buffer student, no buffer budgeting of students, and that is the kids we currently have out of district next year. Now, we think ahead, a year from now. We are hopeful that 3 of those out of district students, so in next year's budget, we would propose, that would be reduced by 3 students because they should be finishing up their educational services. So we would hope for, at this point next year, we do a good job with what we're doing right now. We don't have a need to send any other students in any sort of out-of-district placement. Those students finish up their educational services. We come back next year in the budget with a lower out-of-district line because we wouldn't have those kids anymore in our budget. We don't know, there's a lot of ifs, this is the hardest line, there's a lot of ifs connected to that type of stuff. We do see graduation dates for those students on the horizon, 3 of these students.
And what's your philosophy in terms of kind of doing that tap dance of, do I budget for, yes, there
Yeah.
could be an increase, or the other model of give me a safety net of a fund that I can tap into, so that way, because we've seen many different options over the
Yeah.
years.
I think it's gotta be somewhat of a hybrid of these things, right? You gotta be aware of the kids you have in your district. Like, is there a case you're anticipating that could lead to an out-of-district placement? You might be working your tails off to prevent that, but we've been in this for a long time, you can see sometimes where things might be headed, unfortunately, you know? I am of the mindset that you should have your trust fund pretty healthy because of the like move-in scenario, you know? And then if you do need to break that glass, you can, if it is necessary. But you gotta kind of find that kind of middle ground of it all where you're not, these out-of-district placements can swing wildly. You know, you're talking when you're factoring in transportation, $200,000, $300,000, right? You can't be in the hole for those type of things. So if your kind of trust fund is not ready to absorb that, you gotta kind of plan for that in your budget in some capacity like that.
But there's also the option to call a special meeting in that event.
Yeah, there's a lot of
So there
things
are
you can do.
other options.
There are other options. You don't wanna get into the habit of.
Right, so I think where we're going, because I'm piggyback almost on that question. We've had in the past those who would argue that leave my budget alone, I promise that whatever I don't spend, I'll give back. In return for not cutting too harshly. And there are those who said, it's mine, I spend it, if I don't spend it here, I'm spending it somewhere else. Or I have the ability to spend it somewhere else. Which philosophy should I expect from you? So that I know which way I'm going.
Well, hold on.
I think it's all. Yeah.
So, I hope that with the tax rate setting that just came out this week,
Mhm.
the board made good on.
I'm not questioning yours, I'm asking his philosophy.
I'm just saying, like, from a board perspective, we made good on our commitment to return underspend.
Yes.
Right, and that is absolutely reflected in your tax rates that was just sent out.
Right.
What was that special ed number, 600K?
It was 650,000.
Right, and we have had, and I don't know, again, new, right, we're gonna go with, we're new. We were blindsided by a previous business administrator who changed course at the 9th inning, the 11th hour. I kind of would like to get a feel of the personal views.
But candidly, it's a board decision.
Sure, but it's also a budget decision though,
At the
too.
same time, it only happened once and it was for a small amount.
It was to pay for another project that was outside the agreed upon deal. I'm curious as to, is it all a bottom line budget, in which case unspent special ed funds are in the pot to be used to cover other expenses? Or is it, if we don't spend it, it's isolated and returned? And you can feel however you like, but the budget committee has a right to make a reduction saying, or an increase.
And you have every right to make a motion on the floor to add it back in.
Yeah, I'm sure we have people on phone calls. But it's a valid question, and if you would like to continue to filibuster, that says more about,
I can answer.
Yes, answer.
My goal is to be fiscally responsible for the budget when I'm in the superintendent's seat, right?
Mm-hmm.
My intent when we develop the budget with our team, with the administrative team, is to develop a budget where we're gonna spend the money in said budget, right? Like, if we say we're gonna budget for this thing, that's the thing we're gonna spend that money on, right? Because then you get the trust and the pattern of like, hey, we asked for this amount of money, look, we spent that amount of money on the thing we said we were spending that money on, right? So in the like short term, as we build that trust with everybody as a new team, as a new administration, we can have conversations like we did with the athletic trainer of committing that $40,000 for that contract, not spending that because we're gonna put that in a warrant article to get the position and stuff if that's approved, right? I think once we go down the road and we build trust with each other, so let's take this out of district line. If we're routinely spending 95% of the out of district line, then we're not having a conversation about turning back $650,000 in special ed. So it might be a different conversation of like, yeah, we're gonna tap in that money because we're gonna transfer that into the trust fund related to special ed, and when we do those end of the year kind of, with the warrant article and then the end of the year transfers and stuff like that. So it's trying to find that right balance of all of that.
You can't do that though.
well, he said a warrant article.
If you had a warrant article.
That's what he said, he said a warrant article to
So
transfer.
you just transfer it into the fund.
Then he said with a warrant
With the
article.
warrant article.
Yeah, like if you got that approved, like for example, we had the warrant article approved up to whatever. Like, and some of that bled into the special ed money that we had left over, then like, yeah, then we're gonna use that. But if we're doing our budgeting correctly, we shouldn't have $650,000, $1 million that we're always turning back over in that type of thing.
Agree with you wholeheartedly. See, building rapport.
Any additional questions for special services this evening?
I still love you, Barry, don't worry.
I think I like trying this side of the table better.
All right, if no additional questions for special services, the last budget that we have to review this evening is salaries and benefits. I believe you should have a new handout, the largest one. Salaries and benefits currently shows an increase of $1,159,095. I believe a lot of these drivers were addressed by the superintendent in his early statements with contracts from LEA, LSSA. Thank you. Yep, 900. So if you look at that slide right there, you can see that of the $1.159 million, $998,000 is right there reflected on that screen.
Just correct you, I don't want to mislead anybody.
Nope.
There is some non-personnel stuff and this locked-in stuff in terms of contracts we're committed to, right? Like, so it's not, this is not 998 personnel.
Yes,
You
thank
lock these in.
Thank you.
I'd say, because I'd be interested to go back to the warrant article and see what was projected for an increase as a result of the warrant article this year. Because, like, if people knew that it was gonna be 900,000, would it, just in salary, health, dental?
The health, that's a good question, the health, the dental and social security.
But it's all
here.
contractual, right? So it's all
Right, but
part-
it's also not just LEA. That's the
Oh,
health,
okay.
the dental, social security for
everybody,
in the
okay.
district.
So the LEA salary
Salary.
reflects the warrant article increase.
Yes.
The health and dental lines reflect
somewhat
increase
tied to
associated
that.
with
No, it's not.
benefit,
Sure it is,
all
because health
benefits.
insurance is
yes.
part of the negotiation.
It is, I can check on the exact warrant amount from last year. From memory, it was over 600,000.
Okay.
600 and change, yeah.
Okay.
So that wouldn't count for all the benefits associated with those. We're
It's an estimate, I get that, but if you're like, oh my goodness, we estimated 500 and it's actually 700, I'm not so sure how I'm gonna feel in the next contract.
So, I'm looking at the sheet that Mr. Carter shared as well about the benefits and stuff. So included in that budget is also moving the counselor from part-time to full-time, right?
Those are not in.
Oh, it's on, okay.
We talked about that.
Consideration.
Yes.
Okay.
I can say though that from the
That's a
floor of
salary,
deliberative
and
last
some
year,
of that's
we did
health
add
insurance.
a second
Alright.
counselor at GMS.
Oh, I do remember that. Okay, so this lists the parking lot attendants, the math through the buildings and grounds, those aren't in there?
Those are not in here, right? Now, there are some very small stipends that are in here of various things, and can you just scroll up to the top of that one, actually? And there's the paraprofessional reduction in here, which you'll actually see as a reduction of 11 total, and then one added to CHS to make the math all work, the total is 10. And then 3 different stipends in art club. Get the giggles out, esports.
Yeah, you already know my opinion.
Yeah. And gymnastics coach for the high school. So.
We did find, it was, I closed out of it, sorry. $679,000 was the year one cost with the LEA warrant article.
How much was it?
Well, I think that included benefits as well, so
Some of the health.
correct me if I'm wrong, the benefits shown there includes all staff.
Yes.
And so a portion of that rolled into the 502 makes up the amount that was reflected on the warrant article.
Yeah.
Correct.
Again, it's only estimated when you do the warrant. too.
Right.
Yes, but
Because
if-
benefits are estimated, right? Yep.
I can ask Holly, I don't know how easy it is to break it out.
No, it's,
Benefits
for me,
by
it's
LEA.
ballpark, to
Yeah.
see like what was estimated, like, okay, if we estimated 400 and we came in at 750, well, that's a different conversation. But if it's like, we did 630 and well, 500 is,
880
And again, also,
200K.
somewhere between 70 and 80 is the additional counselor from GMS, which would appear here, but not in the warrant article. We added another.
That would appear in
It
LEA.
was added on the floor, so.
Yeah, that's right.
yep.
Other questions, comments on salary and benefits this evening? Okay. Seeing none, and if there's no other high-level questions this evening for the school team, that will conclude our review this evening. As a reminder, kind of the next step in our process is we do not meet next week, as that is Thanksgiving. But 2 weeks from today, on Thursday, December 5th, we will have a school budget, the first of 2 school budget voting meetings. We'll take a very similar approach, where we'll go in the same order as we went through tonight, and entertain motions as we move through the budget for voting. All right, so I'm gonna move us in the interest of time. I feel like we've gotten a lot of school updates this evening, so I'm gonna move us to member input, new business, school facilities committee.
Well, my understanding is the mailers are supposed to go out some point. Wasn't in my mailbox yet. So, upside is, they missed the political mailing, so perhaps people won't throw them away. But my understanding is they should be coming, maybe with the tax bills.
We'll still take them.
But,
Yeah, they
Because
extended the deadline to what, December
Well-
4th?
yeah, December 4th, my understanding, the number of responses,
739.
Is it ever gonna end?
so here's, the reality is, we're waiting partly for the onsite insight report. They're looking for, and then nobody's actually looked at the numbers
Then
yet,
we
so.
gotta wait for spring, and then, well,
Listen, it's better to take our time, because what happened the last time we didn't? No, the last time we did it, we lost $2 million on a $5 million project.
I applaud the fact
So
that
let's take our time.
every method for every opportunity for people to provide feedback has been given, whether it's been voting digitally, yard signs,
But the reality too
school
is,
signs, mailers, you name it. Like, at that point, my belief is, like, if people haven't provided their input or feedback, they're just simply not going to.
but the reality too is understanding where we are on the state aid. Concord is up. Concord's taking it all.
They're gonna take it, you're right.
So reality is, there's no point, there's no need to rush, because we're not getting anything this year anyway.
Very
So
true.
take the time, get it right, earn community support, so that all the things that people express concern about the first time around can get addressed in the next project.
I agree with you. Anything else for school facilities this evening?
No, don't, just that they'll be meeting later, they'll be meeting after the survey closes.
In December?
There's 2 meetings in December, I'm day by day, so when it tells me to show up, I show up, so.
All right, capital improvement?
Friday.
Okay.
That's just mean. Friday
That's my
before.
standard update, short and sweet. Next.
Do you have any questions for him?
Nope.
Okay. All
Not even close.
right. I will open it up for public input.
Thank you for this was great.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for the team being here. I will close public input. Once again, a reminder, Thursday, December 5th, back over at the town hall, 7 PM, school budget voting. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So made.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Taylor, second by Ms. Douglas. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained, motion